OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Alright, very welcome along. It's Thursday morning and we are live on OTB AM at 7:30. The whole gang are here. Kathleen's here. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. Shane?
How are things? Good morning.
Colm's also here. Colm.
Sure, good morning.
You can hear me okay, can you?
I can, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Colm's live and glorious technical. You lean into the mic there, Colm. You're a bit far away.
Everyone have a good night, yeah?
Very good night. Good morning as well.
First time Manchester City will ever play Inter Milan in a competitive game. In fact, it's the first time sides have met in a Champions League final for the first time since, I'll put it out there,
Something to do with Valencia?
something to do, exactly to do with 2005 Istanbul, AC Milan versus Liverpool.
Really? That was the first
there you
time,
go,
and then
in the
they couldn't
Champions
stop
League.
beating.
And then they couldn't stop 2 years later, of course, the forgotten final, 07, Pipo Inzaghi, Dublin. And here we are again, Inter, the only side, well, one of two sides who could stop this treble. Doesn't look like it's going to happen though.
No.
Miguel Delaney writing the
Manchester
obituary of
United's.
football last night. Yeah, one of two sides said.
Feeling less likely,
Well,
isn't it?
It's a why.
Writing
why
the
have you-
obituary of football last night that Manchester City enjoy the dominance, enjoy the incredible display against Real Madrid, but is this the end of football as we know it?
Wow.
That's a big one for this time of the morning.
Do you think it is the end of... Do you agree with Miguel?
Well, the dominance is uncomfortable.
I don't wanna
However,
be
the
quoting
football
here. That's
the football is exhilarating.
Is that a direct quote, yeah?
Yeah, well, that's the article that he wrote last night and on the Whistle was
Would
brilliant.
you say this marks the end? Is it not already kind of happening? In the sense of
Well-
your cities that take all the players and all the money and...
Yeah, nothing's new from this time yesterday. The difference is that they've absolutely annihilated the defending champions, winners of 5 of the last 9 Champions Leagues. And Madrid didn't put a
There's
finger
a
on them.
stain on it though, because you're watching those unbelievable goals last night, and that performance in the first half was one of the best footballing performances you'll ever see. And yet, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, over 100 alleged financial fair play breaches over 9 years, and you can't get that out of your head. I can't get that out of my head.
Oh, the first half
Even
was
as I'm
incredible.
watching this beautiful football.
I don't believe you. I don't
No,
believe
genuinely.
You. I'm sorry.
I'm literally- I'm enjoying
you're not-
the-
as the goal goes in, you're like, you're just
No,
like, wow.
but across the entirety of the 90 minutes,
Before and after you do, but the whole point of sports watching, that the reason that it works is that you forget that the thing is so beautiful. Like, that's how this all works. Maybe you have the ability, and that's fair play to you.
high moral standards. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But most football fans just get sucked in, watch the game, and go, "This is incredible. This is the high." As Nathan pointed out in the aftermath of the first leg, this is the highest level of football that you're ever going to see. Like, and it's getting higher and higher. And the quality that we saw on display on the field last night was absolutely sensational. I do think that maybe there's a lot to be played out yet with respect to the money. That's really important to remember, that it's possible that City gets stripped of this, or that something happens to prevent them becoming all singing, all dancing, all conquering at the same level, at European level, as they have been at the Premier League. So if they were to win 5 out of the next 6 Champions Cups, you'd be like Champions Cups, European Cups, Champions Leagues. You'd be like, okay, fair enough. But I do remember like Real Madrid losing big games, being absolutely hammered in European football. I do remember the incredible Milan team hammering Barcelona in a Champions League final. Like,
This is just following a trend. This is the point. Like, in the last 4 months, Man City have been behind in games precisely 3 times. When they wanted, they turn it on. Like, Kevin De Bruyne has been left out at the start of the year, starting 11s. And since early spring, they've been untouchable. So much so that you'd credit Arsenal further with keeping in touch with them throughout the whole season. Because, like, I thought the 2017-18 Man City side with Leroy Sané, David Silva, Sergio Aguero, I thought that was the best Premier League team I'd ever seen. And this one is probably not as entertaining on the eye sometimes, but it's far more ruthless and efficient. And at the same time, they still have an amazing ability to just destroy teams. Like, the first 15 minutes, they had 79% possession. They had 13 shots by half time. This is the European champions they were against.
Well, without
was
Courtois,
frightening.
if Courtois hadn't been in goals, Alan
that's-
would have
And then one of the better goalkeeping performances we've seen this season from a keeper who's conceded 4. That save from the second header from Erling Haaland.
yeah.
It's one of the best saves to see all season.
After that save, I was ready to like start
Oh, yeah.
texting my mates, going, "It's going to be one of those nights for City." And like by the time I'd like sorted the phone out, the goal was in. I was like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to put that."
Yeah.
Well, Erling
I
Haaland
was
didn't
tired this
score
one.
over the 2 legs, but should have scored a hat-trick last night if it
Yeah.
wasn't for Courtois. And the save in the second half even onto the crossbar from the 1-on-1, and the first one, like point blank. I know like Haaland headed it straight at him, but like he still had to move his arm to save it. It wasn't luck; it didn't just hit him.
Yeah.
It was like a motivated giant in an FA Cup third round against a minnow. That's how City treated Madrid.
It did feel like that, didn't it? Like they were just walking around them. I don't know why Carlo Ancelotti brings back in Militao instead of playing Rudiger. Like we were talking about in the office yesterday, myself and Phil, we were like, you have to play Rudiger, don't you?
I thought Rudiger dealt with Haaland well in the first leg.
Yeah, really well.
But I mean, is that changing anything?
No, I'm not saying it would change the
I'll
result.
put it to you this way.
No.
Could Madrid have done anything differently last night to prevent what occurred?
Turned up.
Yeah, probably turned up. Vinicius goes over to Ancelotti at one point in the match, and
You're saying, yeah, what's going
And
on?
at that point, so that's a 2-0, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he hadn't touched the ball at that point.
Yeah.
Had not touched the ball once.
Had Benzema touched the ball
And
either? I
then
don't
the
think
next
so.
time he gets it, or the first time he gets it, takes on Kyle Walker, temporarily beats him for pace, and then the recovery pace of Walker just thwarts the chance completely.
Yeah.
And then seconds later, Benzema puts him in, or he puts in Benzema, and keeper just gets there in front of him. And then you have, like, in its own moment in the game, living on an island, is Toni Kroos' shot,
Oh, yeah.
which is an absolute made for a Champions League advert for the next 10 years, where the ball is still from 35 yards out as it goes towards the crossbar, barely moves. Beautiful. But outside of that, like, Modric and Kroos get taken off between the 60th and 70th minute. The narrative will be is at the end of those
Well,
two
it
breaks,
is-
and
it's clearly-
Benzema on the way out.
It's clearly the end of an era. They've been replacing them slowly over the last couple of seasons with much younger players, and I don't think they expected them both to last as long as they did. And this is the one season that's one season too many for them. But next year they'll have a recast midfield, and it'll be one of the youngest Real Madrid teams that we've had in ages. And I think they'll be back next season. Like, I absolutely do think they'll be back. If you add Bellingham, and then it's Bellingham, Camavinga, and
Mbappe.
potentially,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of other midfielders.
Alphonso Davies is being linked as well.
Well, that's their shopping list. Now, whether or not they get all those, we'll see. But so I don't think Real Madrid are going to go anywhere when it comes to big time knockout Champions League games, and so therefore I don't think this is the end of football.
Were the celebrations over the top, or am I just reading too much into it because it's their last game and they're heading off to Istanbul?
I think you're just a
Like-
Man United fan, Shane.
No,
I think
but
all
like,
of this is salty Manchester United.
Haaland had the
coming out.
Haaland had the Norwegian flag wrapped around him. Usually that you see that happen when there's a trophy on the pitch with you. Am I wrong?
They're going full Stormers on it.
Well, like
You're
Inter kind of did it the other night as well, but I didn't see any
Richard
national
Keys
flags.
here, is it?
No,
It's not the end of football at all. Like, it's really not. This is the best football I've seen in my lifetime at the highest level of the game. And the difference between the quality in those two semi-finals, even though they were both comfortable victories for the victors.
Did you watch much of
remarkable.
Pep's Barcelona when they had the greatest player of all time in the team?
I'm saying there's more teams now that are better than then.
But you said it's the greatest football you've ever seen.
I think on a consistent basis at the top level,
Well,
it's
last
amazing.
night
But
was
my
the
point,
best.
my overall point is this reminds me of last night reminded me of the 2009 Champions League final, where Barcelona against Manchester United were the two best teams in Europe, but one was far better than the other.
Yeah.
And that's what happened last night.
Yeah.
So if City want to, if they have the motivation and focus,
I don't think this.
they'll
I
dominate Champions League.
actually don't think Real Madrid are the second best team in Europe at the moment. I'm not sure who is, but
That's a good question. Who is?
I don't know. But like,
That's the point.
their league form has not been great, and even like last season, it's hard to argue that they were the best team. Anyway, but they end up winning because then you had to win in this competition. The money is the thing that's coming up. Richard Dunn last night on telly was like, I mean, everybody's going to go on about the money, but actually all the other big teams, with the exception of Grealish, could have signed any of those Manchester City players, and he's getting hammered for it. He's absolutely getting hammered for it. Is he wrong, Shane?
I think he is wrong. I was reading the Richard Dunn comments. I only saw the quotes this morning. I haven't seen a clip, but I don't agree that.
Will I do some of the quick comments?
Yeah, go on.
If you look at the squad, Jack Grealish was maybe the only one that other teams couldn't compete with because he was 100 million and probably wasn't worth 100 million at the time. Man City have turned him into a player now worth more. If you go through the rest of the squad, there's nobody that United, Chelsea or Liverpool couldn't afford. You could have added Arsenal into that, by the way. City have a plan with how they recruit people, how they do it, what type of people they want for each position. Over a period of a couple of years, they've accumulated that squad. Even with Calvin Phillips, it was done on purpose because they need a certain amount of English players. He was an English player of a certain quality and not on 200 grand a week. They don't make many mistakes. They maybe get a couple wrong at the start, but over the last 3 or 4 years, every single player that's come in has been a success. Look at Alvarez. He came for 15 million, affordable for the whole Premier League and most of Europe. But City were the ones that went out and got him. Biggest draw to Man City is Pep Guardiola. All the players want to play for him. The way he's evolved the team, even over the season, has been incredible. I think what's helped him has been the signing of Haaland. Haaland can play one position and one style, so it restricts how much he can change the attack.
He's right that Guardiola coming in is the reason why so many players want to join City. I agree with that. But I mean, City don't have owners like the Glazers who are out to pay themselves an annual dividend and are out to make profit and don't care about the football club. Like,
Okay.
The Abu Dhabi owners don't care about money because they have so much of it. It's a monopoly.
You bring up the Glazers, right?
Yeah.
You bring up the Glazers, and all they're interested in is taking money out of the club.
Yeah, fact.
It's not a fact.
That is a fact.
I mean, okay.
All the Glazers don't care about Man United.
Let's look at the net spend over the last 5 seasons.
Yeah, okay.
What's the net spend for Manchester United over the last 5 seasons?
Yeah, the more the Glazers pump into the club, I'm sure they feel like the more profit they're going to make and the more they're going to line their pockets.
So, but hang on. Sorry, what?
Well, the Glazers.
What's the argument here?
Well, the Glazers only care about lining their pockets.
It's the Glazers' fault that Manchester United couldn't compete with Man City, right? Even though their net spend over the last 5 seasons is 611 million.
Yeah.
Manchester City's net spend over the last 5 seasons, this is according to Transfer Market, is 260 million.
Well,
They're not the same.
No, of course they're not. But
So the Glazers, by taking all this money out, have also put a load of money in.
the Glazers, you're after saying now that the Glazers don't just care about money.
I'm telling you,
that is all they care about.
But they 611 million net spend. The money's been wasted is the problem.
Oh, for sure, it's been wasted.
It's the people spending the money is what's important. It's not even how much is spent. It's the people spending the money, so Pep's not going to get any credit from most people for winning a Champions League this year because everybody's it was the money. But like if you look at the net spend, you can go back even further. And obviously Manchester City invested loads of money early on, but the biggest net spenders over the last 5 years is Chelsea, and then it's Man United, and then it's Arsenal. And then it's Liverpool, and then it's Man City. Yeah, so does Richard Dunn not have a point?
No, that's net spend. But also the Haaland one, like he said, City only spent 50 million on Haaland. They did spend 100 million on agent fees.
Well, did they?
Ridiculous wages as well.
Okay, but how are they ridiculous? Who's the most?
No, sorry, they're not ridiculous in comparison to what they like. He's probably earning what he should be in comparison to other footballers. But it's still really high.
Manchester United pay more to David De Gea than any other goalkeeper in the Premier League gets.
Yeah, that's also ridiculous.
But the problem here is right that Man City, it's just Man City, it's just the money. But actually, Man United have spent more money than they have. Arsenal are spending similar money. Chelsea have spent more money. So it's not just the money. So Richard Dunn has a point.
Yeah, he does have a point. But money in football is like the internet. Like there's no going back. So you have to accept all that. And Pep Guardiola's got everything he's ever wanted at Manchester City to make this happen for him. And he has done that. But you have to give him huge credit because when they got money exactly 15 years ago this summer, they were just a mid-table Premier League side, so they still had to build all this. The problem that people have, I think, is the source of the money and the nefarious acts behind them. It's not like a self-made million or billionaire coming in like Jack Walker style to be like, here, I'm going to give back to my hometown club. Like I've noticed even the Stan Kroenke stuff with Arsenal this season, it's like the anger there is dissipated massively because Arsenal are becoming a success. I don't have any problem maximising the resources that they have. Happens to be that City pretty much have limitless ones, but they still have to do the job. You can't put any old schmuck in there to do it. Like Pep Guardiola is brilliant and he has everything done to a T for them and he gives them back as well his expertise, and it's a brilliant project if you want to call that world of football. It's the only problem here. It's just like Gavin Cooney was saying the other day on the show. It's like this amnesia around the 115 charges. It's that stuff that annoys people.
That's the thing.
Money aspect is
you can talk about net spend,
irrelevant to modern football.
Hang on, but I think
everyone has money.
Well, the argument about the money was the one that was thrown up to them, and now the charges have existed. It's like, okay, I have post fact rationalisation. I can make these charges, and look, the charges are really, really important, right? And I'm sorry, I'm not saying that for everybody. Loads of people are obviously always talking about the money, and that's fair enough. But I do think that the salty Man United fans, the salty Liverpool fans, the salty Chelsea fans, the salty Arsenal fans this morning, what they did was they identified people who were going to spend the money wisely, and spending of the money wisely is the single most important thing.
Right, but it's not salty to point out that City are the team with the 115 alleged financial irregularities. City are the team. They are not the other teams you mentioned.
They are. But
But I find it amazing that the fans or anyone associated with all those clubs that you just mentioned will have a go at each other because they're all in the same bracket to me. And City just do the best at what they have. Like it's that we're way beyond that ever going backwards. Like that's what football is now. It's a huge business with money pumped into it. The love of it is pretty much gone, but you have this incredible professionalisation of the game where the standard is at an all-time high. That's the sacrifice. That's what you have to accept. That's what's going to happen.
It's a slight off point to what you guys are talking about, but still involves Manchester City. So like we talk about City as if it's just the men's team, but obviously there's the women's team, there's an amazing academy. Like all the money also goes into those things, and the women's team has like competed very successfully for the last couple of years. Say very successfully, like they've always been Champions League, always in top 3 places, have won a couple of titles. And again, they're not necessarily known as like the team that spends an outrageous amount of money, but like spends a lot of money well and brings in good players, works well with the players they have, has a good bench, has that depth of a squad, which I think is the thing about City. It's like it's not necessarily even just the players that are on the pitch. Like they'll buy up the best players from around the league so that other teams can't get them. Like that, Pep has admitted before that that's a transfer strategy for City. It's stuff like that they're able to do, that you look at, say, Arsenal this season, they can't do that sort of stuff. There is like I suppose it frustrates me slightly sometimes when we talk about like City and the ownership, and we talk exclusively about one team and not necessarily the club and all the other aspects of the club. So like that money doesn't just go into the men's team, it also goes into the fact that like there's insane facilities for the women's team. The Academy Stadium is a really, really nice stadium. The younger teams play there, the women play there. There are so many facets to this, and it goes beyond just the team that we saw beat Real Madrid last night, probably going to win a Champions League, possibly win a treble this season.
Yeah, I think Manchester City owners have done a remarkable job with the club from top to bottom.
Well, compare them with PSG.
Yeah,
that's exactly how to do it and how not to do it. But it all comes back to the source. Like you're never going to like these people or be in favour of them. Like,
and I'm not saying you should like them or be in favour of them. I just think that the notion that other teams couldn't have competed with them is actually wrong. The argument about the ownership is a really important one to have, and the conversation to have about the ownership and this being a plaything of a nation state is absolutely completely wrong, and it's a disgusting way for football to have gone. But the notion that other teams don't have similar amounts of money and couldn't have competed with them along the way, that's just not holding yourself to account. That's just saying, well, we had there's nothing we could do because we're up against the nation state. Well, actually, there's loads that has been done and could have been done, and other teams have done, and everybody's managed to beat Manchester City up to this point.
It's just frustrating because we could be sitting here talking about the unbelievable performance last night, and look, we will and should, but also you can't get away from all of this, the money stuff. Like you're sitting last night, and the ironic thing last night is, as that game is ongoing, Coventry City are beating Middlesbrough to qualify for a Championship playoff final. A Coventry City team that were in financial dire straits and have come back from the brink. And just the irony between that match and the story behind that club and the work that Mark Robbins has done with Coventry and what's happening, not far away in Manchester. You're like, it's remarkable.
Yeah, I think like, and so many people say that, right? And it's correct morally. But you look at the first couple of years of the Premier League, just watch it back, like, the standard, not even related to modern teams, and that's because the money wasn't there. Like, yeah, that's what you have to sacrifice. Like, so this idea, it's very romantic. Coventry or Luton are going to be in the Premier League next season, and that is amazing. Like, Luton Stadium isn't even up to standard to play in the Premier League. Like, they'd have loads of work to do over the summer if they're the ones who win the playoff final. But they're going to get obliterated next season if they don't invest in any way in that team. Like, there'll be no romanticism by October.
Yeah, finished.
Managers will be gone, but that's what you have to accept if you're going to make it elitist, which is what it is. And you said we talked about the football last night, and we should, but there will always be an asterisk next to this. But just like there's always going to be an asterisk if Manchester United won the league.
Yeah, if the Qataris come into Old Trafford, and so people comment to me all the time, you won't be complaining if the Qataris come in and win trophy. I will be, and I guarantee you if the Qataris come in, I will mention the asterisk for Manchester United if they win trophies.
You've also said as well before that it won't stop you going to matches, supporting the team, watching all the games. You'll probably buy jerseys in the same way.
Contributing money to them.
They'll still contribute money into the club.
Being a fellow traveller.
Like we had the Glazers. Remember the Glazers protest peaked in 2010.
Yeah,
the yellow and green scarves, the original United colours. And Beckham put it on when he was on loan at AC Milan after that game. Oh, this is brilliant. But sure, the Glazers just sitting back in America being brilliant. more eyes on us. If you can sacrifice the dignity of being hated, you'll achieve everything. Like,
Whoa! Where do we start and where do we end? 7:50 this morning. OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. Graham Hunter standing by. We'll get to him at 8 o'clock. Eric Dillon's going to join us at 20 past 8 to preview the Katie Taylor fight. Sports pages with Cameron at 8:45. Derek McNamara is going to preview the Heineken Champions Cup final. Martin Hoare, marathon runner, 10 past 9. And we'll bring you some Gavin Casey at 9:30. Offaly beat Wexford last night to win the Under-20 Leinster Championship. Offaly are on the comeback trail in both hurling and football. There's a press conference today. Rafa Nadal pulling out of the French Open, we think?
We don't know, but as we were saying beforehand, I don't think he's going to be called at a press conference to say, I am playing. It'll be the first time he's ever not competed at the French Open since making his debut in 2005.
We do basically know. All the papers are reporting that he's out of the French Open.
Where does that leave the other competitors in the field? Like,
Delighted.
In who's most likely then to kind of take up Nadal's mantle for the French Open?
It'll be himself, I'd say. It'll be Djokovic.
Alcaraz?
I'd say Djokovic would be Alcaraz if it came to it. Yeah.
Really, at the moment? Yeah. Alcaraz got beaten recently.
He got beaten recently. He won another ATP 1000, and by his age, only Nadal had won as many. So, yeah, like Alcaraz is already a Grand Slam champion, won the US Open last year, but still has to do it at the French Open. Has a far better chance with Nadal not there. I would still say Djokovic is going to win this, though.
All right. It's Sunday week that starts.
The main draw, yeah. The qualifying starts Monday.
All right. Is there any interest in the qualifiers? Is there?
Why are you laughing
No one pays any attention to the qualifiers for them. Okay.
Is it like the World Snooker qualifiers?
The tennis geeks do.
The geeks do.
No, if you Google French Open, it'll have the start date as Monday. And PM did a stat with Caitlin Thompson this week, and it was the French Open starts Monday, which is technically correct. But the main draw gets going Sunday week.
Yeah,
the bit that first round.
The bit that we'll have grown up watching.
The televised part.
Telly.
Yes, exactly.
The 2 weeks of the French Open starts.
Correct.
You know, the bit of Roland Garros that everybody pays attention to.
Yeah.
I presume they don't use the main courts.
No.
So then, okay.
No.
It's not even Roland Garros.
What are you laughing at? It's the tournament technically starts.
Doesn't.
If you were working at
when
the
does
French
Wimbledon
Open,
start?
If you were working at the French Open, you'd be working from Monday.
With respect. Then the British Open.
I love when a sentence starts with respect. It's never respectful.
No, it's never respectful.
You can ignore everything before that. With respect.
No offence, but
yeah. Then the British Open has basically started now because the qualifiers, like.
I mean,
okay.
I know you're a contrarian. I didn't expect you to bring this up. Like,
okay, we've wasted a lot of your time, viewers.
I'm just waiting for my opportunity. So he's left Shane speechless. Colm is now speechless, and I'm like, what am I going to be hit with that leaves me speechless?
No, I'm not,
I know you're a contrarian, but
we should talk about the World Cup warm-up build-up last night. Courtney Brosnan was on the bench for Everton. Should we be a bit worried about this? Was the last time we saw her when she was picking the ball of the net repeatedly?
Yeah, I don't actually think that was really her fault either, though. That was just a bit of a capitulation by Everton. I think she's been on and off the bench all season. It looked like she had kind of hammered down the number one position at the end of last season, but Emily Ramsey is there, who's a very good young English goalkeeper, and the general consensus seems to be that Everton want to develop her, and hopefully she could be a potential number one for England in the future. So she's been given a lot of opportunities this season, and that has affected Courtney Brosnan, which is really unfortunate. But I don't know, like, she's one of the players that has never necessarily done badly by not playing. So she would be one of the ones that I'd be less worried about, the fact that she's not getting as much game time and the fact there's only like 2 games left of the season.
There's not much competition really for her place in terms of Vera Pauw's thinking at this point. She's nailed on.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I mean, Grace Maloney at Reading is most likely going to be relegated, and then Megan Walsh as well has had like a torrid time with Brighton, hasn't really been able to nail down that number one spot, even less so than Courtney Brosnan. So okay. Yeah, I think she's pretty set.
In other better news, Katie McCabe did score for Arsenal, who are in good form at the moment.
Yeah, good form despite the fact that they have suffered another injury last night. It looked like possibly an ankle break to Leah Volti. It was just a really, really bad challenge, but it's just another one of their key players done. Katie McCabe came out afterwards and spoke very strongly about the mentality of the team, and she's obviously been captain since Leah Williamson and Kim Little got injured, and she was asked, you know, how have you guided this team through this incredibly tough period? And she was like, I don't do anything. She was like, like, this is the team. I just go out and play as I think I should play, and everyone else follows, which I thought was an incredibly Katie McCabe sort of answer to something. But yeah, good goal from her. It was a bit of a, I don't know, I definitely think the keeper should have done a lot better with that one.
Yeah.
I think you're being harsh on the keeper
We
there.
had a debate about this pre-show.
Well, because I watched it last night, and then Shane, you said that you thought the keeper did all right, and I rewatched it again. But like, she was so far over in the goal.
Maybe your position.
She was so close to, and I know it was in the corner, but like, she definitely could have got down a lot quicker. And it was so far out, and it wasn't exactly a very fast or powerful shot either.
It was so far in the corner. Maybe, yeah, you could argue the positioning, the starting position wasn't good. But I think once the ball is hit, she's done all she can to move over as fast as possible. And Katie has hit it as far into the corner as you possibly could. Maybe I'm just Katie bias. Fantastic strike. No,
I'll totally take it if she wants to do a couple of those in the World Cup. Then I'll be delighted. But yeah. No, and I mean, the big games are this weekend. So you have the Manchester Derby and the London Derby. Arsenal are 3 points behind Chelsea, but they have a significant goal difference advantage. So it'll be interesting to see what the result of that one is, because Chelsea are kind of at the stage where they're getting a lot of their injured players back, and Arsenal are just dropping like flies essentially at this stage.
That red card tackle was pretty poor, Aggie Beaver-Jones on Leawati. So like, she immediately gets surrounded by Arsenal players who are kind of pushing her around a bit, going, what are you doing?
Oh, like Jen Beattie and Lotwell Moy looked like they were ready to fight her.
Was she crying going off the pitch? Or
yeah.
she was definitely a bit upset going off the pitch?
No, she was really upset going off the pitch, and I feel bad for her. I think she's like 18, 19, and it was a stupid challenge. It was kind of lose the head moment, but there was no malice behind it. And she released a statement later on in the evening, like a big one, apologising, and I was like, you don't have to do this. Like, how many people do a reckless challenge on the pitch? It's not that big a deal. And Volti herself even released a statement being like, please don't abuse her, like things happen, it's a contact sport.
Alright, we'll leave it there for now. OTB AM live with Gillette Labs, got the ultimate shave of your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. I'm delighted to say Graham Hunter is with us to parse an absolutely dominant performance in Manchester City last night. Graham, good morning to you, how are you?
Morning all, good.
On Virgin TV last night, they were like, at half time they were like, I don't remember a Real Madrid team being as coursed around a pitch as they were in that first half. And then obviously the second half happened and it got even worse. Can you remember anything? I mean, you've obviously seen way more Real Madrid than any of us have. Have they ever had a similar humiliation?
Well, obviously the first Classical that Mourinho faced, which was, I guess, November 2010, 5-0 against an all-time great team, coached by Pep Guardiola. At that point, they tried to play toe-to-toe and were taken apart. I suppose against Milan, back in the era of Gullit and Rijkaard and Van Basten, they did get absolutely smashed. Again, and that occasion, whether it was 4 or 5, my memory fails me. I didn't know it would be a general knowledge test, but if you reach for domestically, it would be that Barcelona game that began the Classical Wars, when you adopted a completely different tactic against Barcelona from there on in, and it led to extraordinary behaviour and extraordinary interest in the fixture, and the rise of the Rossoneri, and that's still under Sacchi, I believe, and those would count as two in the last, I don't know, was it from 30 years? Those two would count as on a par with what happened last night.
That's the level of historic significance that we're talking about from the performance.
Yeah, probably.
Let's focus on Madrid for a few minutes, because we've spoken a good bit about them over the last while, and whenever we do, you list off the ages of the young players coming through and just how sensational the talents are, and it felt like they'd managed to bridge the gap between the old players who had carried them to all of their victories in the previous years and then injected the elixir of youth into the side. And last year they won the Champions League with basically the same team, so like, you can't say it didn't work. Maybe this is just the end of that team, and the birth of the new team has already happened, and it'll mutate into it'll be the kids team next season, because I can't see them taking the field next year in a similar stage of the competition with the midfield of Kroos and Modric still key to trying to run the game.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. First of all, if I'm going to answer comprehensively anything that you've said there, the point has to be that any analysis has to take in the fact that City were extraordinary. And there wouldn't be many sides, I don't think, that would withstand City playing at that level. Madrid contributed because patently what we saw last night was irresistible force meets movable object. Madrid didn't compete with the same intensity. They were second to almost every 50-50 ball. They began to make more and more mistakes, but the picture of the match told you that Ancelotti had misunderstood the potential gap between the two sides, and therefore, probably if you had it again, you would pick a different 11, Valverde instead of Rodrigo, Camavinga in midfield, Rudiger and Militao in the centre of defence, Alaba at left back. And then let's see whether the gap would have been narrower. Question. Secondly, it's probably time to be careful about how we speak about, for example, Modric, you mentioned there. He'll be 38 in a handful of months, so your point is bound to be true that changes are coming. Still a guy who powered his country to third in the World Cup, aged 37, and who's been influential all season. And Madrid took an absolute smashing last night. Moreover, irrespective of where you work like me or who you support like millions of Madrid fans, there's nothing to do about last night other than to hand plaudits to City, who played at an Excelsior level. It was a joy to watch. Anybody who enjoys sport, let alone soccer, would say that that was 90-something minutes of just the best attitude, movement, use of the ball, tactics, readiness for big moments that you can ever really expect to watch. But I still think that we look at a Real Madrid side who, when they won the European Cup and the Spanish title last season, they'd only done that once before, jointly, since 1958. So a dip this season was predictable, inevitable almost. They put all their eggs in one basket to retain the Champions League. They'd fallen behind a very, very average Barcelona side who won the title. So we knew that there were flaws already. We knew that that transformation that you're talking about between the young team and the old team was imperfect. And Ancelotti will look at how he prepared for last night. He'll look at the conclusions he drew from last week, and he'll realise that he's contributed to the errors. Prior to the match, there was a lot of briefings coming out that two of the sports papers in Spain are very... They pledge allegiance to Florentino Perez, and the briefings were coming out that Ancelotti, irrespective of what happened, was completely safe. Already this morning, questions are being raised to the contrary, which seems to me to be the howl of pain, the fact that nobody associated with that club, understandably, enjoys anything like humiliation, never mind simple defeat. So there are a lot of questions, but I won't be joining in a stampede to say this team is finished or Kroos's influence has gone forever. They were taken apart in the night. They've been looking tired for weeks. There's been a World Cup in the middle of the season, and they are not as well planned in the evolution of the team as, for example, City have proven to be.
I know we're not body language experts, Graham, but you look at different aspects of the last night when, Ancelotti, every time the camera pulls to him, he's scratching his head. There's a moment in the first half where Vinicius is coming over to him, exasperated by maybe by the tactics. Benzema, his body language as well. Modric probably had the poorest game we've seen of Modric in some time. Are there any reasons for that? Like they just seemed disinterested, but as you say, maybe that's because of City.
They're interesting points. The first thing I'll say, Shane, is that calm, not particularly involved Ancelotti, is identical body language to when they won the Champions League last season. It was absolutely identical at 2-0 down at Anfield. You won't see him massively animated, and you won't normally see him making huge tactical changes during a half. Alterations at half-time usually are about retouches, individual players being told to do something slightly different. You'll sometimes see a liberation of somebody who's supposed to be a third forward, Valverde, being told you're an out-and-out forward or drop back, we're playing 4-4-2. Retouches are fine. He's tactically astute. In terms of body language, in terms of the fact that you saw him passive against the Typhoon, that's the same man as we've been watching for seasons. Vinicius' frustration is easy to pinpoint. All the first leg, the supply to him was cut out. And therefore, he was arguing, this is happening again, we need to change. And it did happen again. If you excuse me, I'm going to cough right. That wasn't me shouting at the football last night. Touch of the summer flu. And I think that when I talked about Ancelotti having to rethink now the way he approached that tie and learn from it, and that's a word he used a lot last night. He didn't speak much. He said, we have to learn from this and improve, not just get better, learn from this. And I think that when you looked, I found it revelatory last week sitting listening to Pep Guardiola. I've rarely heard him say this. He went, I have understood, I've got a little idea, and he came back to it again and again, not just when questioned. I've got a little idea about how to open Real Madrid up. I know what I'm going to try to do next week. For him to say that, left him open to being unpicked, to understood. To say it immediately after the match, in all my experience of listening to Pep Guardiola, which dates back to, as a coach, 2008, it was really unusual. One of the things he did, because what they patently also did was up their intensity, they upped their press. They were far better at that this week than last week. But the overload done the right, because while Camavinga didn't play exceptionally well as a left back, massive amount of the time it was about the other players around him didn't react to the overload, and they consistently got different players overloading him, probably usually based around Silva. And that worked a treat. And I think that when there's a really big x-ray of what happened last night, the strategy and tactics, as well as Madrid's athletic ability and intensity, will come under focus. So there's no escaping the fact that the gulf was bigger than the final result, much bigger, based on play, based on readiness, based on athleticism. For example, if you look at last week's game where on a number of occasions, Bernardo, and he said this after the match too, didn't go into details, Bernardo Silva looked athletically in the way that you're describing Modric and Kroos at the moment because of circumstances. In the goal, Bernardo Silva wasn't simply outstripped for pace by Vinicius in the first leg. He wasn't ready, he wasn't on his toes, and there were a number of times when players from Real Madrid streamed past him. He changed his attitude, changed his behaviour, changed his pitch position last night, was at or around the man of the match. So I think the side which was better resourced, better prepared, and did a better job between matches won last night. And I think that for that reason, there'll be a critical gaze turned upon Ancelotti because he hasn't handled these 8 days particularly well. For my taste, I hope it doesn't mean the end of him at Real Madrid. It could do. He may choose to go to the Brazil national team. I'll miss him very much indeed. He's incredibly interesting. He's often very witty and funny. He's a calm, interesting, articulate voice in the maelstrom of madness that goes on week after week in all European elite football. So if this means the end for him, it'll leave a better taste for those who admire him and like him. And it's also ironic. You both know Pep Guardiola suffered to what he calls, I can't use the exact, the closest, I filled my trousers worst in my life in the 2014 semi-final where his Bayern side got thrashed 4-0 by Real Madrid in Bavaria. And I've been gentle about the phrase that he used. That was the worst night of his coaching career. Here he is. Different two teams, okay, or he's in a different circumstance. 4-0 in the semi-finals, however many years later we are from 2014. And he's turned the tables on Ancelotti. Great sides sometimes, or great clubs, sometimes get a slap in the face, get a pie in the face, and then they move on. I think Madrid, in general, will cope with this well and rebuild and be ugly and nasty and frightening to all their opponents next season.
Yeah. And you can see them spending heavily in the summer, and we've already heard about the Bellingham likelihood. Does something like this make a knee-jerk, and it wouldn't be knee-jerk really because they've been courting Mbappe for so long, but does it make it slightly more likely that they try and break the bank to get somebody like that in?
It's such a confusing subject, Ger, because, and there's no way I'm going to try and say, here's the inside track, or I'll take you as far inside as I know. One, they are insanely desperate to sign Haaland. They still think that they can. They're still briefing Madrid's two papers that Haaland will stay one more season at City and come to Madrid. Personally, I doubt that. It's feasible. Madrid are an incredible draw. And if you're going to wait for Haaland, do you bridge the gap in the meantime, or do you go all out for Mbappe? On the Mbappe subject, it's clear that things are changing at Paris Saint-Germain. He perpetually is in the huff with them or them with him. Messi's leaving, Verratti's leaving, not before time. What I'm completely unclear about is whether Florentino Perez, not Real Madrid, but the president, the all-powerful president there, has forgiven Mbappe for now turning Real Madrid down 3 times. That's the type of behaviour that a man like him has never had to tolerate before, ever. And if he swallows humble pie and goes back after Mbappe, it will be only when Mbappe has promised on his honour that if he doesn't sign for Real Madrid this time, he'll donate 3 fingers. There will be absolutely nothing short of that. So whether it happens or not, it's patently clear that Benzema's had a much more difficult season. He's 3 years younger than Modric. Before the last 2 weeks, he was averaging a goal or an assist every 93 minutes. But he's played fewer times, therefore he's scored fewer times. I think that last season, Benzema and Vinicius contributed between them 100 goals and assists. This season, it's 79 goals and assists. So they're a chunk off, but it's still pretty extraordinary. Yeah, Ger, you're right. They will go after a massively important striker at some stage. Whether it's Mbappe or Haaland, and whether they achieve that this summer, frankly, I don't know. And I'm also a little bit doubtful.
Let's move on to City and Pep. We've been talking this morning about how the charges that are hanging over the club is kind of a mood music around the back of this, and it is something we should constantly talk about because it will ultimately, I think, colour how this team gets remembered. And so it's important to foreground that as part of the conversation. And at the same time, you kind of need to have a split personality where you remember that, but I find myself really enjoying Bernardo Silva and loving the fact that Jack Grealish, Aston Villa Jack Grealish, is running games at European Champions League semi-final level, and still with the joyous abandon that he had as a championship footballer 4 or 5 seasons ago. Explain to me why I feel this split, Graham.
Because you're intelligent and experienced, I suppose. It's really testing. I find it shrill the way that a certain group in the UK media hammer City all the time, because all of us were taught innocent until proven guilty in life, not just in football. That leaves those who are not stamping on the ground all the time right now, maybe feeling a little bit red-faced if some of the, 114 charges, is that right? The charges relate back to the beginning of this era. They concentrate very heavily on the Roberto Mancini era. At the moment, for the last 2 seasons, the charges are largely about City failing to comply, failing to help. If some or all of them are subsequently proven to be true, then it's pretty clear cut. We have to try to dissect more clinically our appreciation for what we've been watching and our disappointment and disgust at rules having been broken. Rules are there for a reason. Rules in this instance are principally there to stop the abuse of mega budgets, I think, and to try in some small way to even the playing field. I've got no embarrassment about saying that the brand of football I'm watching from Manchester City enthralls me. It's joyful. And it doesn't look or feel like a cheats project. The rules and the judgments, if the process is carried out scrupulously, might say eventually, these were cheats. It doesn't look or feel like it. That expression that they use in American law, that emanates from American law, if it looks like a something and it smells like a something and it walks like a something, it is a something. I'm enjoying this in the meantime, principally because, one, I know Begiristain well. I've known him for years. He almost never gets mentioned. He scouted and built a treble-winning side at Football Club Barcelona. The treble is a rare beast. I think only 7 clubs have won it. Only 2 clubs have done it twice. Guardiola is on the point of, and now looks a reasonable favourite to be the only coach in history to win the treble twice. There's evidence there that that he's the continuous factor. And if rules have been broken and money has been misused, that will taint their achievements. There's no question about that whatsoever. If they're proven innocent, if there's no verdict, then life is so tempestuous and testing for all of us that at that stage, I think you move on and you grumble and there's an asterisk maybe, but enjoy what's in front of you for the moment and respect what's going on too, because in my opinion, Begiristain and his team, no putting together of a mega project like that pertains to one man or woman. Marina at Chelsea, it doesn't matter. And United's treble was largely won without a director of football. But Begiristain and Guardiola bridge those eras. The extraordinary treble they won in 2009, which again was joyous to watch, was remarkably constructed. Part of it owed to a time before Pep Guardiola, because the kernel of the side was put together before he arrived. But they're the two bridging men, in my opinion. And I think that what unites them is that it's, for my taste, I don't think we're watching a side which smells of money, which makes them a steamroller that nobody can get out of the way of. They've had to go to their ultimate to beat Arsenal in this title chase. And several weeks ago, although I said I thought that Arsenal would fumble and that City would overtake them, it was an estimate, not knowledge. The majority of people, I think, thought Arsenal would see it through. City have had to go to the extremes. They haven't beaten Manchester United in the FA Cup yet. That will be a WWF experience. That will be raw, I think. And genuinely, charges aside, because we don't know, and it's innocent until proven guilty for my taste, we're being offered something which is aesthetically beautiful to watch. And again, which is not contrary to what you said, one of the things that Pep Guardiola does is he makes footballers better. It's not just the tactics, it's not just his accumulated knowledge in the way that he can unpick other sides. He makes his own footballers consistently. Who would have believed that Mahrez would still be there? Who would have believed that Stones could make this transformation into the type of footballer he is now, where he plays now? Who would have believed that Kyle Walker could have been shepherded away from the more robust side of life that he likes, and would have kept his physical conditioning such that natural speed is one thing that people talk about Walker all the time. He's, given how occasionally he lives and wants to live, the nick he's in, because it took 30 minutes last night for Real Madrid to put 5 or 6 creative passes together consecutively. Instantly they did. Vinicius was sent through in his own. And Shane, your point about the passive Ancelotti, and my point about how he was at Anfield, if it's not Kyle Walker in peak form, not fast Kyle Walker, but in peak shape, he doesn't catch him, and probably Vinicius scores or sets up a goal, and the tie's different again. So, for my taste, you said, why do I feel like this, Ger? It's because we're looking at something extraordinary, and it's only once we hear the judgments that we can understand whether we should have a bitter taste in our mouth or just continue appreciating something that's off the scale good.
One thing that struck me watching the game was just how good and how settled the side is at the moment. It's clear he's got a first team in a way that wasn't really that clear. If we look back to previous European Cups where they went out, there was always a slightly random decision that was made, and you're like, okay, I haven't really seen a lot of this before. So that would suggest that in his own mind he hasn't got that settled. The team looks very settled at the moment. It picks itself in many respects. There's talk that Gundogan might be at Barcelona next year. There's talk that loads of other clubs are interested in him. Is it your experience that Pep, if they win this treble, that everything just rolls forward again, that they obviously strengthen, but like that kind of, he goes into whoever the person saying, no, we're not giving Gundogan a multi-year contract, and says, we just won the treble, we're doing what we want because I want to keep this team together?
I think it's part of his magic that, he often tells the truth in public, which managers are not contracted to do. And when he says, I don't want players who don't want to be here, he means it. And it's not that Gundogan is saying, I want out. He does want a bigger length of contract than City are offering him. But he's pretty obsessed is too strong. He's very, very keen on the idea of coming to Barcelona. The negotiations are very advanced. It looked like the two people that Gundogan was negotiating with, Matteo Alemán and Jordi Cruyff, would both leave. And suddenly that would leave the deal at least a little bit affected. Matteo Alemán looks like he's staying now. I think that the chances favour Gundogan not renewing and going to Barcelona. Barcelona have their own financial problems to deal with. To make sure that happens, I think it's a very strong likelihood that Gundogan says goodbye to Manchester City, playing the best football of his life at 31 with the treble. Their two principal targets, not their only targets, but their two absolute principal targets were Guardiola and Bellingham. When I say were, still are. There's no deal for Bellingham to join Real Madrid. It appears like the player favours Madrid. But Guardiola and Bellingham were their two principal objectives. Other players who demonstrate that they don't want to be at City, Pep will push them out and say, thank you, goodbye. So change, I think, is likely. Wholesale change, I think, is unlikely. I think the majority of his squad are well rewarded. The contract situations are well handled. And while Bernardo Silva definitely has had a hankering to move, and if Bernardo Silva had his choice about move, he too would move to Football Club Barcelona. Laporte will leave. Laporte has been given the in football terms, the cold shoulder by Pep Guardiola, who I think worries about his if I use the phrase football intelligence, then maybe I'm being a bit harsh. But I don't see a future for Laporte at Manchester City. Certainly not an easy one. So I think he too will leave. There'll be turnover. Wholesale change? Definitely not. The majority of the squad not only want to stay, but are ripe for staying there. Very few are reaching an age where they can't play Pep's football. So I think minor changes. I think if they can, they will sign Guardiola. And I think that will be an exceptionally interesting purchase. Because he'll be 21 by the time he gets there. And Pep, with all these players, will make him better, Jeff.
Graham, we'll leave it there. Great stuff. Thanks a million. It's Graham Hunter's thoughts on the game last night and the wider European situation. It's 22 minutes past 8. OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. During the ad break, you're going to hear a clip from this week's episode of the Koi Gig podcast with Emma Byrne, Karen Duggan and Kathleen McNamara, talking about Chelsea now well on course for the double. The Koi Gig pod on Off the Ball is in association with Cadbury FC, official snack partner to the Republic of Ireland women's national team. After the break, Eric Donovan talking Katie Taylor.
OTB AM,
the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
OTB Rugby.
If they just go out and play the way they did against the Sharks or all these other guys, they'll lose. That breaks my heart to say that.
Sorry, Matt, if they do what? Like they did against the Sharks, they lose?
The rest of play this superior running game that gets them through the whole season with these incredible wins. If they just play the same tactics completely against La Rochelle, I don't think they'll win. If they do what they've always done, I think La Rochelle can counter that.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
They haven't really impressed. Yes, they're still up there. Yes, they're probably going to win the league, but they haven't impressed at all. And, you know, the Champions League is what they were going for because that is the step that they have to get to. And to be honest, they didn't really look like they were ever going to make that. I think they were lucky to get in and play Barca in the first place. But with regards to United, I mean, they're up there. They're the number one in the league. They should be going to the FA Cup and thinking they can win it. Absolutely, especially against a team like Chelsea that you can score against, you can dominate. But you had two teams that basically, you know, the problem with United is they don't have the killer instinct. They don't have that player that can really turn the screw, that can punish teams. And Chelsea would be more than happy to play against that. They'll soak up the pressure and then they'll go against them in the counter-attack. And I don't think United's defence were up to that. I don't think they performed to their best, personally.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
So Chantal Cameron fights against Katie Taylor on Saturday evening in the 3 Arena. It's the return of big time boxing to Dublin after a long time. I'm delighted to say Eric Donovan is with us in studio to talk to us about this. We had Dennis Hogan in yesterday, and he was saying he was at the point when Bernard Dunn was fighting. It's, you know, we all know the reasons why there haven't been big time fights, but it's really important that this is here, that it is happening. There's very few people in Irish life who could like sell out the 3 Arena the way Katie has, and so there's a lot riding on this.
Yeah, there's a lot, I suppose, but you know, the positive news is that boxing is back in Dublin. You know, I was at the Bernard Dunn night as well. Brilliant, classic night. Never, like, you know, legendary. I think Katie Taylor boxed on the undercard.
She was the first fight up. Yeah,
as an amateur. So, that's brilliant, and just to see the crowd that came out to see her yesterday at the open workout as well. Lovely weather as well, thank God.
Definitely helps. Yeah,
it does. But she creates some buzz. You know, you could just hear like she's. I think Ariel Halwani, he's the MMA kind of broadcaster type guy, and he was just talking about it's like a roar similar to Justin Bieber, like, you know, with the kids, like, you know. So it's brilliant. But that's the kind of I suppose admiration that she has across this country.
Yeah. What do you hope that it means in terms of future fights and like just getting the sport back to a situation where there are semi-regular big time fights in Dublin? They obviously don't all have to be at 3 Arena. You know, the National Stadium is a brilliant venue. There's other places that they could have shows. And what does it mean for professionals in Ireland who are thinking, actually, you know what, I can make a career out of this?
Yeah, well, I think it's a good opportunity for the guys on the undercard as well. They're linking up now with big UK promoters, like Eddie Hearn has signed Gary Cully. He's also, I think he's done a deal with Dennis Hogan. He has Cuivan Agarco from Belfast. Thomas Carty is with Dylan White's promotions, you know. So there's more and more Irish guys signing to these big UK promotions, which is positive in the sense of getting big fights over here in Ireland. You need that kind of backing, and like Eddie Hearn, you know, love him or hate him, he puts on the big fights. He's one of the best in the business, and I know he gets a lot of stick as well, but he's doing some serious business in the sport of boxing, and you know, thankfully he's managed to get Katie over here into the 3 Arena.
Before we get into the nuances of this fight in particular, it is a bit mad that we haven't had more professional success given how successful our amateurs have been. And I know and I understand that they're completely different sports really, but you would have thought with the numbers coming through, the high quality coaching that they're getting at underage level, that we would have had more professionals who reached the top level over the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, it's a very hard sport, Jerry. You know, it's kind of sport / business. You know what I mean? It's very difficult to you know, to be a world champion in that sport. You need a lot of things to align for you, a lot of things to go right for you, but you definitely need good backing, good promoters, good managers, and at the moment, well, over the last number of years, you know, a lot of Irish fighters would have had to go to America, you know, and then it was very hard for them over there to make, like even Andy Lee as well had to go to America, done his trade over there. I know he came back and linked up with Adam Booth, but you know, he still won his world title over in America, you know, yeah. And that's where a lot of Irish had to go. Bernard Dunn done his trade in America, came back, but it seems now that they don't have to go over there, you know, that they can have these big fights back home. There's plenty of good coaches in around the UK and Ireland, and there's also a lot of strength in depth now in Ireland. You know, there's a couple of gyms around Ireland now where you can go and get really good quality sparring, professional sparring, but in the past you would have had to leave the country for that type of sparring, but now we got that pool, so to speak, strength and depth, and I think that can only, and it kind of the amateur game almost shot itself in the foot with this, you know, because of the whole kind of controversy around the Olympics and the kind of corruption, and that, you know, more and more fighters are leaving the amateur game at an earlier stage, and the professional game, as tough as it is, it can be a very lucrative business, and that's the appealing catch for people.
I think I remember you saying before, Eric, you felt that Katie should or could have walked away after beating Serrano, and like, how do you feel about it now heading into this one? Because as we were saying during the ad break there, it is dangerous.
It is dangerous, but like, I kind of feel like, who am I to say, like, you know what I mean? Like boxing is Katie Taylor's life, and she lives and breathes for the game, like, and that's it. And she is happy she's so happy. She loves raising the bar, loves taking on the big fights. I'm just full of admiration for her. But like, for me, it was always about, like, Katie, go out on top. I don't think anybody deserves to take you off this pedestal, like, and that's because I just have a really close friendship with her, and I love what she's done. But I think everybody has their time, you know what I mean? But look, I think her time is coming, but I don't, like, if Croke Park is a possibility, I think that would be an incredible arena to go out in.
It's back in the ether. It's back being spoken about kind of in hushed tones around the fight, that there's a possibility of a September fight, and obviously that would have to be Serrano, really. Now look, you say it's a business, and you point that out. Like, you have to be planning. You have to make a plan for what's coming next. Does she have to win this fight to have the Serrano fight? It feels like she does, right?
She does. Yeah, she does. That's the thing with the boxing. It's kind of like winner stays on. You know what I mean? And to be honest with you, I think Katie would do serious numbers, like, even if she didn't win. Like, her legacy is cemented, but it just means, like, it does kind of keep the train rolling, and in a very good, positive way. But make no mistake about it, this fight is a big fight. It's a dangerous fight, because she is at a disadvantage in a lot of ways, but then at an advantage in other ways. So you've got Chantal Cameron is the heavier opponent, 5 pounds heavier. She'll be coming down from a much heavier weight than that as well. She's a 3-inch reach. She's a 3-inch height advantage. She has youth on her side.
Can you talk to us about the weight, right? Is there a potential that that's a double-edged sword, where the bigger person should have more power and should be stronger and should get all the benefits of that, but actually coming down the weight is not easy, as we know.
It's not easy to cut weight, because cutting weight, it takes a lot away from you. It can affect your strength, it can affect your mental preparations, and it just can affect your overall game plan. But I don't think she is she's big for the weight, but I don't think she has serious problems making the weight, so which means she will be very strong. Because I watched her fight against Jessica McCaskill, because that's the kind of, they both boxed a couple of similar opponents, and you can't really gather a whole lot from they both boxed Sanchez, they both boxed Bustos, but they both gave them two opponents shutout wins, so they were like unanimous across the board. But the most recent one for Chantal Cameron was Jessica McCaskill for the undisputed title, and I thought it was a close enough fight, but she beat McCaskill. Katie Taylor beat McCaskill 5 years ago, when McCaskill was in a better kind of form, McCaskill's 38 now. Katie boxed her when she was 32, 33, when she was I think far better than she is now, and Katie kind of beat her well, came through, had to weather a couple of storms in that fight, but beat her well overall. And I think Chantal Cameron only boxed her last year, beat her, but it was a much closer fight. So she has a lot going for her in terms of weight, height, youth and all that, but in terms of boxing skill, when you break it down to the boxing skill, to the little nuances in the ring, in the rounds, I think Katie is far superior.
Okay, we'll get into what that actually means and how that's going to show up in the fight in a moment, but I want to play everybody this. This is Chantal Cameron speaking yesterday to her own Aisling O'Reilly. Have a look.
When you're fighting Katie Taylor, have you had to adjust your training?
Just going through the gears. I've had tough sparring, high work rate on the pads, whereas usually I can chill a bit on the pads, but we've got a game plan, and it's meant I've had to go through gears and up my fitness. So training's been intense, but I love it, so it's been good.
And fighting Katie Taylor, she's had to jump up in weight class in order to have this fight. Do you think that was a risk for her?
I think I'm quite shocked they didn't bring me down to 135 or met her 137 pounds, but yeah, she jumped up to 140, and all respect to her because she could have had the easier option, but she challenged a bigger, stronger girl, so all respect, but it's kind of a mistake as well.
And for you personally, to be able to fight someone like Katie, is this a big moment for you?
Yeah, huge. Everyone and anyone around this weight category want to fight Katie Taylor because she's the queen of boxing in everyone's eyes, really. So to get the opportunity, I'm over the moon. And also I'm going to come in here to ruin the homecoming. So it's a bit of both because I'm here to win. I'm not here just to take part.
Yeah, it is an interesting point about the weight. I guess we should give Katie Taylor all the credit in the world for that. Like, she wanted to make the fight happen. The Serrano fight wasn't going to happen. She could easily have just fought anybody, because basically if Katie Taylor was having the same build up to this fight this week, Ireland would be delighted for her and would be showing up to support her. But she's putting her record on the line against a bigger fighter who's undefeated, who has a 17-0 pro record. Like, it's really risky.
It is. And you know, Katie called for this fight. Katie called for it. If Katie didn't want this fight would not happen. And that's why I have so much admiration for her. And she went against her character in terms to get this fight. She put up a post on Twitter, so
not like her at all.
So unlike Katie Taylor. You're undisputed, I'm undisputed. Let's get it on. It's funny, I was listening to an interview with Chantal, and she didn't even see that tweet. Her phone just started hopping. She would come home from a training session, her phone started hopping, people sending her the post, and of course she's going to oblige. But she actually boxed Katie back in the amateurs. That's a long time ago, like 2011, 12 years ago. Katie beat her, but I think she was a bit starstruck getting into the ring. Because Savannah Marshall and Nicola Adams were on the team as well, and they were kind of spooking her out, she's like a god in women's boxing, and she kind of was, at the time, and still is. But I think she was just she just was she enjoyed the experience of boxing Katie. But Katie beat her well. But look, it's 12 years on, so it's the perfect scenario for her in terms of now you're developed, now you're seasoned, now you've all the belts. Go and do something about it,
We did a piece with James Tracy yesterday talking about the value of being at home for Leinster in the Champions Cup final at the weekend, and he was just talking about the crowd actually having an impact. I hadn't really heard anybody confess to this before. Like, when things are going badly for you, there's a kind of a brain fog that comes down, that comes washing down off the terraces. But when things are going well for you, you feel like you have this surge of adrenaline from it. Could that be important? Like, if she was a little bit freaked out 12 years ago, is it possible that the crowd can somehow get in her head a little bit?
Yeah, it's a good question, because even from the interviews I've been watching and listening to, I'm not convinced by Chantal Cameron. I'm not. I don't believe her. I'm not saying she's a liar, but it's I don't feel the conviction is there.
It's a fake it till you make it.
Well,
all the fighters do it a bit.
Well, you have to. It's a poker face, but I just think walking out there into the Tree Arena on Saturday night, she's going to hear something, feel something that she's never ever experienced. And the noise decibel you can imagine from the Olympic Games that time, I think the Tree Arena, the roof is going to be taken off it as well. And I think that will definitely catch her in her, stop her in her tracks, to just, whoa. She already knows she's up against the kind of, let's say, the queen of boxing, or the pound for pound, the greatest female boxer in the world. She already knows all of that. She knows how big this whole fight is. And in as a fighter, you're still training, you're still believing in yourself, you're still thinking, I can do this. But I just think it's going to be something she's never ever experienced, and I think that could catch her.
There's an amazing post fight interview with Bernard Dunn on that night in 2009, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's basically, what a day. The Manx got beat, Ireland won the Grand Slam, and now we're world champion. Yeah. And it's all aligning for a similar day on Saturday. I mean, maybe not I don't know. But the rugby's on, going to be a full house there, and then everybody rolls on to the evening. And so I do think the crowd will be a fever pitch, and I do think it can have more of, she doesn't need the crowd, hopefully. But
she will, to be honest, she will have the crowd. And the crowd, I remember, my last fight, I weathered a couple of really rough storms in that fight, but the crowd really got me going. And I would have heard over, throughout my career that, in the big professional fights, the classics, that, you know, the energy of the crowd. I never really got the chance to experience something like that. The Irish title fight against McAfee, I kind of did. The stadium was kind of half full. It was good. It was a good buzz, but I never really felt in that fight that I was under the under the cosh. But in the round 10 of my last fight, I was literally moments away from being literally stopped or out on my feet. But the crowd, it just kept me going, and they call it the 12th man or whatever. Like, you know, it really is something special. And I can imagine for Katie Taylor's fight that's on a whole new level, you know, because people are just literally almost in the ring with her. And I think that's going to be very daunting for Chantal. Chantal has like I said, a lot of advantages. She's a very economical boxer. She wastes nothing. She gives, you know, she's very, she does the simple things very, very well. Good jab, good, strong, high defence, and can be hard to break down. But because it's only 2-minute rounds, I think that will stand to Katie. That Katie can, you know, be in and out, showing her feints, landing her combinations and moving. But she's going to have to be very disciplined, because one of Katie's flaws is, and we know this, is that she likes a fight far too often for my liking, or I suppose her coach's liking. You know, she likes to square up sometimes and really go. And I wouldn't, like in this case, that would be a, you know, kind of a red flag. Stay away, because you don't want to play into the hands of Cameron, the heavier fighter.
Technically speaking, does Chantal Cameron match up to anything that Katie has experienced before in her professional career or recently? Like, is she a similar type boxer? Is this something that she's maybe not going to be used to, or how does she compare?
Well, Katie's already boxed somebody who's an undisputed champion, albeit in a different weight, in Mando Serrano, and we know, like, that was women's fight of the year across male or female. It was just an absolute classic, and I'm still gutted that my poor wife got COVID in the week of the fight. We were supposed to be there, but look, it's going to be a consolation.
Not that you bring it up often.
Yeah, so it's a consolation for us to for Saturday night, so we cannot wait for it. But yeah, I think Katie's been in with better opposition, much better opposition. I think Cameron was 20 years old when she joined boxing, and she made the switch over from kickboxing, you know. So Katie's been immersed in this sport since a 10-year-old girl, 9 or 10 years of age. She's been around the high performance unit for years. She's very well schooled. She's got great pedigree behind her. You know, I know she's getting on and everything like that as well, but I just think she'll have a little bit too much for Cameron on the night.
There is talk that she might engage in the all-out war at some point. Katie,
well, if it's Katie Taylor that steps into the ring, you can be damn sure she's going to do that. She says it herself afterwards. I don't know, you know, I just love a tear up every now and then, you know, and
maybe like rounds 9 and 10 when she's up 8-0 on the scorecard.
Yeah.
Go on, just don't get caught.
Yeah, you don't mind it. You don't mind it at that stage, but you're gonna have to be very disciplined here in this fight, because, like as I said, Cameron has a very good defence. Very. She's got a tall kind of height advantage.
What do you do when you're fighting someone who's taller than you?
Well, the feinting has got to be really key, because when a person is much taller than you, they're going to want to be out on the outside, keeping you at long range. But Katie's going to have to try and get inside with fast attacks, but you can't just go in recklessly, carelessly, because you can walk into heavy punches. So she's got to get back to what she used to do really in the amateur days, that feinting, you know, that she was brilliant at that. So the feinting is kind of just setting those traps, almost you know, trying to trick your opponent into thinking you're going to offload, you're going to let your punches go. It takes a high energy, high volume to do this, but when she does it, as soon as Cameron offloads, Katie will counter punch. So kind of a slip, a dummy. It's like a dummy, you know what I mean, and a counter punch afterward. Again, takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy. But rounds can be won in snippets. They don't have to be. It doesn't have to be 2 minutes of non-stop action. You know, you got to be clever. It's got to be in stages throughout the round. Get the quality work done, and then stay out danger when you have your work done, and move. Get on your feet. She has brilliant footwork.
Yeah.
And I think she's much better footwork than Cameron. And I think if she can get a lead on Cameron, win the earlier rounds, then she's going to bring Cameron out. You know, out of her I suppose comfort zone, because you're going to have to come forward.
So start fast and try and
build up a few rounds, because once you get 3-4 rounds in the bank and you're winning, then you want Cameron go back to a corner, and you want Jamie Moore and them saying, listen, you're going to have to go for it. And then kind of when you're hearing that word in the corner, you're not relaxed anymore, you're not comfortable, it's not flowing, you're knowing that you're going to have to go out now and do something outside of your game plan or your tactics. And that's what you want it, because then you start making mistakes, because you're rushing, you're chasing the fight.
We have some Katie here, we can have a listen to her again talking with Aisling yesterday.
When this fight was actually made, when I knew that the home court fight was actually going to happen, I was reminded back the first time I actually said put on a pair of gloves as a 9 or 10 year old. Just all the sacrifices year in year out that I made, all the obstacles that were in my way from a young age. Now here we are, women's boxing again is headlining a huge show, and we're going to be the centre of attention in the whole boxing world again. And I'm just so grateful for this journey. It's been amazing.
And the likes of you have paved the way, but also the likes of Ger Fogarty, that really kicked it off. And I know she was a big hero of yours.
Absolutely, and it's amazing that Deirdre is actually going to be there on Saturday night to support me. That's so special for me. And she was the only female fighter I actually knew of at the time when I was growing up, and she was always so encouraging towards me. Always made so much time for me every time she was home. She held the pads for me a couple of times. She invited me over to her house a couple of times. It's just amazing the support that I actually got from her, and she's actually going to be there on Saturday night to experience this amazing fight as well, and I'm just so grateful.
Am I right in saying that the statue's been unveiled on Friday? Is it?
Oh no, the statue has not been unveiled. There's going to be an evening with Deirdre Gogarty. Right. It's like a bit of a storytelling, and it's going to be a fundraiser for the statue. So I'm going to be at that event as well. Looking forward to it, because I can imagine some incredible stories.
She's clearly massive influence. She's going to be in studio tomorrow, Deirdre Gogarty, as well, which I'm looking forward to as well. But clearly a massive influence on Katie's career. Yeah,
and fair play, credit to the Kieran McIver and all the committee that have got behind it, because you often wonder if there was no Deirdre Gogarty, would we have a Katie Taylor? So she had to leave in 91 because it was illegal here, so you can imagine she's I suppose the OG or the trailblazer, that kind of way. So
okay, so high intensity, high energy, get an early lead. What's the Chantal Cameron camp? What's their plan? How do they want a war early? Kind of assert the fact that you're the bigger, stronger fighter, and then give Katie Taylor something to think about if you were plotting a win for them?
Yeah. See, in female boxing, like even Chantal Cameron now, I think she's 17-0. I think she's got 8 knockouts, but 7 of those knockouts are from her first 10 fights.
Right.
Katie's 21, 22-0. She's got 6 knockouts, but their last 10 fights, their last 7, 8, they're against high opposition, and it's very rare you see knockouts in the female weight classes at the higher end of it, like at the world title stage and undisputed. So knockout in this probably not going to be. I can't see it. I just can't see it. So they're going to be looking at points, obviously. So they'll know that Katie is very quick, very fast, very sharp in everything that she does. So they're going to be trying to warm in. I don't think they'll send Cameron all guns blazing in the early rounds. I think they'll want her to warm into this fight, because it is a big occasion. She can get very overawed, especially if she starts bulling in the first round or two and gets clipped by Katie and gets embarrassed, gets humiliated. That can affect the whole game plan. So I'd say she'll try and really start trying to warm into the fight, finding her shape and distance. And I'd say probably in around the mid, after a couple of rounds at least anyway, they'll probably try to start turning the screw and turn the heat up on Katie, so not exactly sure what their game plan will be, obviously, but again, you're going to, in order to beat Katie Taylor, you kind of have to do what she's doing a little bit better, but I don't think she has in her locker anything better than what Katie has, so it sets up for a really good high octane fight. but I see Katie coming out on top in the end.
Okay, well that would be a good result, and then we'll get another fight in September in Croke Park, and hopefully if the weather signs on that, because I think that we're probably maybe people aren't ready for this yet, but we're entering the end of Katie Taylor. This is definitely the beginning of the end. Like there's not that many more fights left.
Yeah, that's true. And it's just great. Isn't it wonderful to see her back home on Irish soil? And I was just thinking about, I'm going to 2 big fights within the next week, and I don't have to get onto a plane. I'm going to Katie Taylor's fight and I'm going to Michael Conlan's fight, and that's brilliant. That is brilliant to be able to say that. And there's a lot of Irish guys getting the chance to box on the undercard as well, and it's brilliant. My old gym mate Thomas Carty, you've Gary Cully who's on the rise, Dennis Hogan, Cuivan Agarco, and then you have a lot of guys on the undercard of Michael Conlan's fight too, Malloy, Anto Kakachi, etc. So look, it's great time for Irish boxing. I never saw this coming over the last couple of years, so thank God.
Well, fingers crossed that it all goes well. Eric, thanks a million for that.
Pleasure.
Here is some Eddie Hearn goodness for you to whet the appetite further.
We've seen Katie headline Madison Square Garden. What a fight that was, what an occasion that was. But she said this is her biggest test yet. She has to jump up in a weight as well. Is that a bit of a risk, do you think?
Yeah, I think, she's stepping up in weight. She's fighting a bigger opponent. She's fighting definitely a fresher opponent than Amanda Serrano. Chantel Cameron has believed for many years she wins this fight. And Katie Taylor's always said for many years, I'll take the fight. But now it's become big enough, it's happening. But this fight's going to unfold very quickly. Chantel's going to force the action and try and engage in that war as soon as possible. And the problem is with Katie, she's so stubborn. She might have tactics to box and move for the first half of the fight. As soon as she starts engaging and the free arena erupts, we're going to go straight back to Madison Square Garden and that moment against Serrano where they're going toe-to-toe. And it's going to be a thriller.
I spoke to Chantel and she said she's in the best shape of her life. She's never felt better. Her preparation went perfectly. You can see she is really ready for this.
But you go to that next level when you're in those kind of fights. You know that when it got tough for Chantel in training camp, she was thinking she's fighting Katie Taylor. She pushes harder, she pushes deeper, she becomes fitter, she becomes stronger, and now she comes into this week just full of confidence. She's the champion. Katie's the challenger in this fight. She's trying to take the belts off Chantel Cameron, and both girls very confident going into this fight.
Right, Eddie Hearn in conversation yesterday with Aisling. I think Eddie Hearn is on Talking Bollocks, is going live today around about 5 o'clock. So very interested to hear how that's going to go. Now, our own Cameron is here.
Yeah, absolutely terrified.
Cameron, how are you?
Bit worried.
Trying to make a Cameron Archer Cameron Hill, but it didn't work.
Apparently I'm fighting Katie Taylor this weekend. Yeah, that seems a bit of an L for me.
Best of luck.
So I'm gonna go to Berlin because I kind of feel like there's a George Costanza mix-up brewing, where I end up in the 3 Arena in the ring and
stumbled into the BBC studios one day. The taxi driver. Did you ever see that?
Oh yeah, exactly. That would be typical me now. So I'm gonna try.
You're gonna be DAZN is actually like basically the main TV sports channel in Germany anyway. So you'll be on your DAZN on the phone.
Yeah.
On a local phone in the queue for Berghain on Saturday night.
That's it. So it's all working out. But I just thought a bit of land and water between us mightn't be any harm at all.
Do you think you're going to get in?
To the Berghain? Oh, we're not even trying. It's not worth it. We're going to keep it low key. I'm actually going axe throwing.
Okay.
There's a bar apparently in Berlin where they do. It's a bar and then there's just a big wooden target.
That sounds
down
safe, yeah.
Really safe, yeah. And my friend was saying, we do it all the time. And I was like, that's a bit concerning. He said, well, no, sorry, we're actually beginners. And then I couldn't work out which was worse. So if I come back with less limbs, you'll know why.
Okay. I didn't expect this to be an interlude into Cameron's travels this weekend, but if this is what you want, leave a note in the comments and we'll find out how we got on next week with his review of Berlin.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
you were here to do the sports pages.
Yeah,
you don't have any papers in front of you.
No, I have a distinct lack of.
I was going to say there's a slight issue.
Format,
up here,
a little bit, format issue there, but we'll crack on anyway. Can I imagine what's on the sports pages?
Or you could give us your prediction for the Champions Cup final.
Okay, interesting one. I was at the one in Marseille last year, and I was
cheering for Munster.
Cheering for Munster.
Yeah,
yeah. I was going as a neutral, and then I think just
Oh, you got carried away like everybody.
The infectious nature of the La Rochelle.
Front-running Connacht fan, cheers against Leinster. What a surprise.
Oh, well, I thought with Delan coming in the after season, maybe, I thought I'd give my support to Stade Rochelet. But the atmosphere was absolutely incredible. And if it can be replicated at all this weekend, all the better, because the La Rochelle fans brought it last year, so I think the Leinster fans will have to seriously up their game, as I'm sure they will. It's very touch and go, isn't it? In terms of the result, I think Leinster are going to scrape it. I really do. I think they will have an answer. There's that hurt from last year, obviously, that it went down to the wire. And they just didn't have enough. I think they have much more of belief despite last weekend's result against Munster. I think they're going to be able to cope.
Okay. Cameron, enjoy Berlin, and I'm looking forward to your next paper slot with no papers.
Hey, there we go. Paperless paper slot. Going green.
It's 8:54. OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. What does the data say? Derek McNamara is back with us. Good morning to you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Ger. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, keep well.
Are you excited about this?
I'm very excited, yeah. Like, it's been a pretty spectacular season for Irish rugby, for Leinster rugby, for Munster rugby. It's been an undoubted success if you're looking at it from an Irish perspective.
Four teams in the Champions Cup next season as well. Yeah.
Similar to your game against Ronnie O'Sullivan.
It's up there.
Did I see a touch after you potted the second ball? Did I see you thinking, I'm going to beat Ronnie O'Sullivan
here? You start to get excited. You're ahead of yourself. Some of the comments said Ronnie had actually cheated as well. I mean, listen, I'm not saying I'm better at pool than Ronnie O'Sullivan, but sometimes you can see the success in your eyes.
Yeah, I know, it's up there. So, look, it's been an amazing couple of months, really, and we got to take that into consideration. And like, if we look at it from an analytical perspective, when these teams start off at the start of the season, right, it's nearly like a line, right, where you've got a really good player who you know is really, really good. You can push that player to try and get them into good positions, or get them into positions where they can make a bigger impact so that you can win. Or else you've got a better skill set. So you've got a better skill, say counter-rucking. You push that because you know that you're better at that than other teams. And then you can do it, say, for backroom staff, or you can do it from, say, a physical, mental, technical, and tactical. If you have a way of measuring those things. So like the Munster last weekend, Leinster, had a coaching melter, to be honest. If you've got 2, maximum 3 games left in the season, you play your best team no matter what. Like, that's just, in nearly every other sport you do that.
Yeah, but then what if one of them gets injured and
you run that risk anyway?
You don't. I mean, you didn't play them. Like, they didn't play the front row. They didn't play first choice second row. They didn't play their first choice 9 or 10. They didn't play the first choice fullback or their wings.
The team that they played was a mismatch of both. Right, you're nearly better off putting on your total seconds team. The chances of those players ever playing together, let alone even coaching together, during the season, it's not just about putting out players and expecting them to win. There has to be a plan. And if you're in the NFL, or you're playing soccer, or you're playing any of these other sports, they're physical sports. You want to keep that small incremental steps and learning, playing together.
So
2 games.
In a situation where they had played their full bore last week, right? And we know La Rochelle rested basically there for first choice. Which coach would you rather be?
I'd like to be the Leinster coach. Well, had they won, but now you see in the media, the entire media are like, are Leinster going to lose? But this team hasn't lost a game. This team who've played together, whether it's for Leinster or for Ireland, the last time they lost was against La Rochelle this time last year. So, like this line that I was talking about, Munster were able to push the physical side of things because they knew Leinster weren't going to be at the races. They pushed the physical side of things. Or if you look at the likes of Arsenal this year, okay, where they had a really young team, really young background or staff, played fantastic, free-flowing soccer at the start of the season. And then, as the season went on, they just weren't able to actually keep that up. And very similar thing that happened to Liverpool before they won the champion or the league a couple of years ago. The season before, they fell apart around the same time of the season. And what they did is they used analytics and data to measure kind of what it is you need to do to get to a point of winning the league. And that's the way they're able to bring in the specific players who are able to come in and play at a specific level. And that's quintessentially what analytics is having a way of measuring yourself versus all your other teams that are out there. And what we do in Rec Rugby is specifically, well, we help with all that type of measuring, but we also help with what's happening in the game. And when you get to professional, when you get to the elite level, you're able to then implement game plans based on the analytics, based on where your line is compared to where the other line, your opposition's line is. And what I thought would be a good idea, a good exercise, is to look back at this time last year's, and look at the game, the final last year.
Because it's actually going to be largely the same Leinster team, with obviously the exception of the 10. Starting. We expect it to be a very similar starting team. There might be one other change, maybe.
Yeah, and look, if we were to look at where La Rochelle are compared to where they were this time last year and this year, they're kind of roughly the same in certain elements, certain skill sets, but passing they've improved significantly, and they've improved in the back row as well. So they're 7 with Botia playing now. He's significantly improved them. But if we were to look at what Leinster have done between last year and this year, they have significantly improved in nearly all areas. And if we put those two lines together, Leinster are still significantly favoured, but they were this time last year as well.
I don't remember what the odds were last year, but the spread, which
I think there were 10 points last, or 11 points last year.
Okay, I think it opened this week at around 11, but it's down to 7 now. Is what so a lot of money's come for La Rochelle this week is what that means.
Yeah,
like a really significant amount of money. If I'm right, if it did start at 11 earlier and it's now 7, it's not like a few 50 quids here and there. That's a big amount of money that will come from.
Let's bring it back.
Yeah.
But if we look at what happened last year, okay, so if we look at what La Rochelle did prior to the actual game, okay, so basically when they were creating a game plan, they looked at kind of 3 main areas. And I think we have a slide here just to show that. So basically they went out to disrupt the game plan.
Is this last year's plan?
This is last year's game plan, okay. So they went out to disrupt Leinster's game plan, hold on to the ball and disrupt the breakdown. Okay, so the first one, when we say disrupt Leinster's game plan, okay, they basically there's basically the 2 lines of game plan, and prior to the games last year, it was identified that Leinster had a significant drop-off in the second half, okay? So La Rochelle would have known this, so the idea is how do we stay in the game?
When you say they have a drop-off in the second half, what do you mean?
So the accuracy of players, the accuracy of the breakdown, the overall performance of the team had a significant drop-off. Whether it's passing the ball, the accuracy wasn't as good. Whether they're entering the ruck, the accuracy wasn't good. Or whether or not they were making tackles or missing tackles. So there was a significant drop-off in Leinster's performance last year.
So over the course of the season?
Over the last 3 or 4 games leading up to the final.
Okay.
So when we had the line of Leinster, there was a significant drop-off in the end of the second half, but La Rochelle's was nice and straight. But in the first half, La Rochelle were significantly less, or weren't as good as Leinster, basically. So La Rochelle had to disrupt Leinster's game plan, and they did that by understanding where Leinster's carrying came from, which was their back row. So that was their biggest threat. So they were able to blitz in midfield to take away that first receiver off the second pass, behind Sexton and the pod.
Yeah.
So they were able to blitz to slow down Leinster down.
That would tend to have been a back row.
Yeah.
And so
we don't have to worry about all the other carriers. We just need to worry about the back row.
And so that's a cue for the defence, because again we were talking to James Tracy about tells and things that you see, and in the analysis you're waiting to see stuff, those patterns emerge, and when they emerge, then okay, I actually know where the ball is going to go here, because you've done the work in advance.
Yeah, and that's exactly so. La Rochelle would have known this last year. So basically, if they were able to disrupt Leinster's game plan in the first half and slow that ball carrying down, then they knew in the second half the data shows that they could, they got a bigger chance of winning, and that those trends aren't there this year. Okay, so there's no drop off in Leinster's performance this year. It's steady the whole way through. They're not making the same mistakes. The substitutions that they're making a little bit earlier, or a little bit, injuries this weekend is going to be huge, because 2 teams are going to go out of hell for leather. If Leinster can avoid getting an injury earlier on, then it's a massive, massive bonus for Leinster. Massive bonus. So the second thing that La Rochelle like to do is they like to hold on to the ball. Okay, so if they have the ball, then Leinster can't score. Pretty obvious. Okay, but when we look at the data, they're happy enough to hold on to the ball in midfield. So they spend around 50% of the time in midfield. I'm not sure if you remember during the Six Nations, Italy were similar. They had a similar type of game plan in midfield. but they weren't ever able to break the teams down they were playing against. And as a result, they weren't able to, cause penalties. La Rochelle, on the other hand, they play really, really narrow. They play more narrow than Ireland do. So that's something that Leinster will know this year, is they don't need to worry too much out wide over the first, second, third and phase. But as soon as they go through the phases, that's when they have to worry. So then the last thing that they looked at is disrupting Leinster's breakdown.
Can I just ask you about that? So say this is going to happen, but with the big beasts that La Rochelle have, I know this thing that you're going to do to me, and then you do it to me anyway, and I'm like, oh man, it's even more depressing now because I could have stopped you, but I just can't stop you. Yeah,
so I think Leinster's defensive line has improved significantly. So there's the way in which Leinster plays, again, very, very similar to Ireland, nearly identical, where they can play different patterns when they're in defensive line. So they can actually close the door, they can sprint up, they can blitz, they can run up and stop every time the ball has been passed. So I'd expect to see those types of game plans being implemented this weekend, and the other side of this whole thing is that there's, we're going to talk about it in the breakdown, is decoying. Okay, so when you get really, really good at implementing game plans, and you get really, really good at being able to measure the performance of your opposition, you can set decoys. So you can show as if you're doing one thing, but a matter of fact, that's just what the opposition wants you to do. Okay, so that's what I'd expect to happen when we look at the breakdown.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so basically when we look at the breakdown, so La Rochelle, when they're counter-rucking, okay, last season when we took the last 4 or 5 games leading up to the final in 2022, they contested around 60% of the breakdown with a 17% success rate. So what that means is the average is around 51%. Okay, so La Rochelle contesting with the breakdown. So what 17% means of success rate means they either disrupted, they either slowed the ball down, they either caused the ball to spill out, they turned a turnover, or they caused a penalty. Okay, so that's what that 17% means.
And is 70% high?
It's not unusual. Okay. It's actually right around where everybody else is. Okay, so when we look at the actual final, though, as La Rochelle actually contested 85% of all breakdowns.
So they made it a war zone.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, exactly. So the consequences of that is that it draws an extra player in from Leinster's play. So rather than there being 2 players per ruck, there's now 3 players per ruck. And what that does is then it causes the back line to not have players in the positions that they need to be, which disrupts even further what's happening in the game.
Yeah, and the knock-on is Leinster scored no tries.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so while the success rate at 15% is, average, but if you do it way more, the average being at a similar number means the actual number of times that you are successful increases because you're doing it more often.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's also more physically wearing, I suspect.
No, but see, that's the thing. So we'll go into now in a second, just around the individuals, but how you combat that. So something that probably Leinster didn't look into, which I don't know if they're looking into this year, but I think they'd be silly not to, is that if you're counter-rucking, if you're actually making an attempt at the breakdown, then that has a significant impact on what you're doing, okay? Because if you're...
Leaves space behind you, you mean?
Yeah, all of a sudden there's space either left or right of the breakdown. And what Leinster failed to do last year is do that pick and drive, and the heat and the exhaustion and everything kind of... they lost by last play of the game, right?
Yeah. We're talking tiny margins here, world-class teams.
Yeah, so but the point here is that if La Rochelle go to do that this year, if they go to that kind of 70 to 80% breakdowns, then Leinster are going to know that this year. So this is how the game has evolved, using data, using analytics.
But maybe that's the bluff.
Maybe this is the bluff. We're going to get to that. So when we just look at La Rochelle, where they are now in 2023, so we've looked at their last 5 or 6 games, they're around 66% of contested breakdowns, which is high. It's reasonably high, with a success rate of 19%. Okay, so they've ticked up from where they were last year, but they're still in the ballpark of where they were. So they can push that 85% if they want to. But when we look at who it is that's responsible, so when we look at the final last year, we have Skelton, Aldrich, how do you spell this name? Bourgeois, is it?
Bouguerie.
So
that's how Raj pronounced it. I think
Bouguerie.
Right?
So it's funny because anytime I'm watching these games, I never have the audio on. because we're always doing it like, so I don't know how to pronounce most of these names. Buggery. So basically we've got first, second and third for people that are watching at home. And then we have the success rate. So Skelton slows the ball down around 25% of the time. So, 1 in every 4 rooks that he hits, but he hits a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. But the thing with Skelton is that he never causes turnovers. Okay. He just slows the ball down. So Leinster are going to be aware of that. They don't have to worry about him stealing the ball. They just have to worry about him slowing the ball down. But if all you have to do is worry about slowing the ball down, then that's okay. You can live with that. You don't have to put the players into the breakdown as you did last year.
So if you identify what the threat is, you can deal with it.
Yeah. So then Aldrich last year, who was number 1, he had a significant impact on the final last year. He actually stole a lot of balls. Burgery, he actually had 0 impact on the game, even though he hit, I think it was like 12 counter rooks in the game.
This is specifically on the counter rooking, yeah.
Yeah, just as on counter rooking, okay. And Botia didn't play last season, okay. So then we'll just look at the last slide, which is 2023, okay. And Aldrich now is nearly no impact again. We have Skelton, who has again a significant impact in the game, but it's just slowing the ball down. He doesn't turn the ball over. And then Botia, who is, he doesn't hit as many rooks, but he's the guy that we got to worry about as a Leinster fan.
He's their Tadhg.
Yeah, very much so. He's the guy who causes the penalties. He's the guy that causes the penalties or turnovers. But if you can live with Skelton, we can live with Aldrich, and we can live with
Botia.
Yeah.
Buggery.
Yeah. We can
can't live with Botia though. Sorry.
Botia. Yeah. So we got that's the one thing. And if we were just to go back to the initial game plan, disrupt Leinster's game plan, stay in the game. They can't just rely on the 3 back rows to be worrying, because Leinster's game plan are much more dynamic. They can't just come off the line and sprint like they would against who was it? The Dragons or whoever they played in, or Ulster. They can't just do that sprinting, because the lines of running that Leinster run are so far superior to anybody they're going to play against this year. Hold on to the ball. La Rochelle must hold on to the ball for at least 20 minutes of actual game time in the game. And if they don't, then they're going to be significantly disrupted. And then disrupt Leinster's game plan. I just don't think that they're going to have that same success that they did last year, because of the things that we've spoken about, and because of the understanding around the breakdown of these players causing a distraction. It's not real. It's they may turn the ball over once or twice between those 3 players, Aldrich, but Botia, if they just keep an eye on Botia, then, and Leinster have another plan, I'm sure, to take away certain elements of La Rochelle's game plan, which are pretty simple. Like, really, there's not a hell of a lot to what they do in certain areas, especially the set piece. They got to be really, really tight.
So I know you say there's not a hell of a lot to it, but like, again, talking to James Tracy, he was like, their maul is once it gets going, and even in the papers today, the front row are talking about the scrum. We need to get the ball out of the scrum really quickly, because once they get you going, once they get you moving.
Yeah, that is one of those things that we use analytics to try and turn their strength into a weakness. So they can't start a maul if they don't have the ball in the line-out. Their line-out is really, really simple, like scarily simple. So that's where they would.
Is that not a strength though? Is it like
from La Rochelle's perspective?
Yeah, if you have a very simple way of getting to your strength fast.
Yeah, but
that's
when
a real
you
strength.
have one player who's lifting 41% of the time. So one of their players, I'm not going to mention who it is, lifts 41% of the line. So he's nearly involved in 100% of all the lineouts. So you don't need to worry about where the ball is going to go. You just need to worry about where that player is.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Again, right? Say they're able to do that. It's coming, and they still manage to do it.
Their maul isn't actually that good. Their maul is really, really. What would you call it? It's really frenetic. Okay, so they get the ball down and they come at different angles to push the ball. But if you stop that at the start, and same with the scrum, if you can stay really, really tight and try not to push, just stay tight, they come on for the second push. Okay, so again, if Leinster know that, then they can. If they just stay tight, then depends. I think who's the referee?
I'll double check here for you.
South African dudes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, then. Okay, and then they need to get the ball out quick.
Piper, isn't it?
It's Piper, yeah.
Okay, it is, yeah. So there's a couple of things, but like again, there's the number of scrums that have been played in professional rugby has dropped by 20% in the last year. So there's not that element necessary in the scrum as there would have been. So we're trying to look at those two lines. If we're saying, okay, La Rochelle are here, Leinster are here, where are La Rochelle slightly better? After last week's performance, I would say coaching, they definitely have a bit of an up on the coaching as an overall product. Do they have better players? No, they don't. It's all of Ireland's team. These players have been playing together for years. This is the pinnacle of what they're doing. We've got the World Cup in a couple of months. Are they better at skill sets? They're slightly better at passing. Their 10 is good, really amazing kicker. So they have to be really wary about giving penalties anywhere in their own half or in scoring position. But as a 10, as a threat, he's not a threat. He gets the ball and he ships it on. He doesn't even come onto the ball very quickly. So he doesn't take it flat. So he's not a worry. So there's all these things that are being said in the media, which is like, okay, that's a really good perception on it. But in reality, when we look at the data, Leinster are favourites. And if they're only 7 points favourites, then I'd be putting a few quid on it. Well, if I was into that thing.
That is not gambling advice, just by the way.
No, I don't even gamble.
So you're confident that Leinster are going to win this weekend?
Yeah, come on.
All
That's
right.
stupid.
All right.
Finally a bit of confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence, stupid. Okay, Derek, reactrugby.com if anybody wants more details. Thanks a million. That's Derek McNamara with us previewing the game this week. A reminder, OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. Make sure you follow us across all our social channels available on the podcast network today. You can catch Wednesday Night Rugby, Gavin Casey previewing the big fights, and the hurling pod with Will, Paul and James. After the ads, the male national marathon champion Kildare's own Martin Hoare live in studio. During the ads, you're going to hear a clip from the latest episode of the Football Pod where Paddy, James and Tommy talk about Donalogue's well publicised comments. Also ran Grand National for also rans. The Football Pod is in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the football, hurling and camogie All-Ireland Club Championships. Check out the hashtag the toughest for more.
You're listening
to OTB AM.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast?
I'm really concerned. It's not been wise of the European Club Association to say it like that. There's players that do not have any football for 11 weeks. If you would only release them on the 10th of July, with a 10-hour jet lag going to Australia, you can put your ambulances next to the stadium to transport them to hospital with ACLs.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
I was just surprised, particularly for someone involved in the GPA, to just come out. That's like a cheap shot at the other sport, that the Tailteann Cup doesn't really matter. The Tailteann Cup is needed. We said this from day one, and all the teams, to be fair to their credit, last season and so far this season, have really engaged in it because they know what's needed.
Like, I don't really care what Donalogue says about football at the same time. Like, he obviously has his own agenda, but his own agenda was go down swinging and take every other sport down with him. He went after rugby. He's gone after football. It just sounds bitter and jealous. Yeah. It's just, it has the wrong tone. He went at it the wrong way. I guarantee if he looked at it now, he'd say, why did I say that? But I don't think anyone in football circles really is going to take any notice of what Donalogue says about our product, because it's at the best it's ever been, probably.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Right, we're turning our attention to athletics. I'm delighted to say Martin Hoare, who is an ambassador for the Irish Life Dublin Marathon and the Irish Life Dublin Race Series, is with us. The hugely popular race series runs through the summer and includes a 5 mile, 10k, 10 mile and a half marathon. You can enter at irishlifedublinmarathon.ie. Martin, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well.
Did you run in today?
No, thankfully I got the train. So run home, hopefully.
You do normally run into town 2-3 times a week?
Yeah, generally do, to be honest. It's a nice way. So I've a bit of background. I've 2 young kids at home, a fairly hectic work life as well. So anywhere I can get the train in I can.
So you work in
Ballsbridge.
In Ballsbridge, and you live in Kildare. Where's your nearest train station?
Hazelhatch.
Okay, so the train would take how long to get in?
I'm a train conductor now. About an hour 20.
Right,
I'm
okay.
gonna say.
All right.
And it'll take me about an hour 25, an hour 30 maybe to get in.
To run?
Yeah.
Right, so it's actually just as quick.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I'm not going to disparage Irish Rail, but any delays with Irish Rail, I'll beat it, right?
Right, okay. So, when did your running career start properly? When did you kind of think, okay, I'm going to be fairly serious about this?
Fairly serious. So I dabbled a bit for a number of years. So look, to be honest, I played football for a long time from Maynooth, and to be honest, I kind of took a step change with work. Didn't really have the time for it to commit
to football.
To football, yeah,
at club level.
Well, Kildare's fairly competitive now.
Yeah, but it's really interesting to hear that there's a pressure on club players to a point where they can't commit to it.
Well, you have to look at the flexibility, and working in Dublin with a long commute, to be honest, is a big game changer. So, to be honest, it was an easy decision for me, and to be honest, I had a passion for kind of running, and I started dabbling in running from, I'd say, about 2010.
Right.
But I would say really kind of taking it quite seriously. I know when Brendan Hackett came on as my coach in about 2017, I kind of took a step up on that. Then had 2 years of stress fractures, which was quite interesting, but I learned a lot in it. So I learned a lot about myself and about how to manage training and load and everything during that time.
So,
a lot there.
How did the stress fractures happen?
To be honest, it was just poor training. So I had to learn really how to train properly. So going from where I was as quite an amateur runner, to learning how to actually take the load and to train. It's kind of like building blocks and getting my body able to be strong enough to hold it. It takes a bit of time and a lot of learning, if I'm honest.
I'm just interested now, and we haven't thought about this that much, but the difference between how we train in amateur sports, our amateur soccer players, our amateur rugby players, our amateur GA players, and now you as an athlete who's winning marathons, is there an easy lesson that everybody could learn if you were to go back and tap yourself on the shoulder as a 15, 16-year-old in Maynooth and go, might train a little bit differently here, how about we try this?
Look, to be honest, I think it's across every sport. It's not just a way of training. The nutrition has changed. Everything has changed. So the nutrition, your strength and conditioning, your core work has changed. And just like when it comes to running, load management. So if you're in a field sport, I'm surrounded by kind of jerseys here, but the field sports are a lot easier on your body because it's on grass. It's far more cushioning there. It's only in the last few years that we've probably had the same kind of level playing field with the new runners coming into running. That kind of gives us the same sort of ability to recover. So like as a 15, 16-year-old, I'm kind of tapping that guy on the shoulder and saying, get on the track and get out running quicker. Nice. Because that's probably what I was better able to do personally. I've probably lost a few years I wouldn't say lost a few years, it's probably a wrong thing to say because I hugely enjoyed it, but I probably would have loved to have done it a bit earlier.
Do you think there's loads of people like that, like you, who are kind of, we have an untapped potential when it comes to athletics because people end up playing field sports and really enjoying it, as you say, but that actually there is some kind of unearthed gems?
To be honest, the easy answer is yes, right? So athletics is like this huge potential, and if you look at kind of what our history was, so some of the people like Tracy, like Coughlin, like the history we have in athletics in Ireland is so big, and it's huge, and some of this, like just the general standard of running back then at a club level was so much stronger and in depth than it is now. And to be honest, you kind of see, I think the tide's coming back because I think athletics is becoming far more popular again. I think it's becoming far, like the flexibility and kind of just how people approach it is changing. And like you see it, to be honest, in this year's Irish Life Dublin Marathon, they're promoting kind of bringing more women back into the long distance events, and to be honest, they have a whole range of kind of promotions to kind of get that female participation up. And to be honest, that's the way it is. It's to get people more involved in the sport, and just to do it really, than to actually step back and
Are you at peak age for a marathon, or what is the peak age for a marathon? Is that the $1 million question, or does it differ from person to person?
I hope I'm not yet. But no, there's a lot of different things. So peak age is probably late 30s, which to be honest, I turned 36. So so I'm probably in around where I should be. But with the way things are changing, I think it's getting younger and younger for a marathon. I suppose everyone's different, right? And as I said, I only really got into competitive, like the topper end, probably in 2017. So I was quite late to it, and I didn't have, or I wouldn't have had the same, I suppose, track background a lot of people have.
Yeah.
So where you'd be quite specialised at, maybe some people might have been 3,000, 5,000 metres. I never, to be honest, I barely hopped onto a track in my life.
Right.
Only in the last few years I've started doing it to get speed. But to be honest, I was a footballer, and to be honest, I did that instead. So it depends on your background. If you were a very strong athletics background, what I'd say is you come to the marathon a lot earlier, and you'll be a lot stronger at it. But other people like me, it probably takes a bit more time to build strength.
Did it help having someone like Brendan Hackett? Like Brendan Hackett will be a name familiar to a lot of people in GAA circles in terms of inter-county management and club management as well. Did it help having him on board, because he understands your background as a GAA player as well, but you know, his athletics I guess knowledge is second to none as well.
Yeah. To be honest, he's a gem of a man. To be honest, he was the CEO of Athletics Ireland back in 2000. So he kind of transcends both athletics and GAA very, very strongly. He's huge. So sports psychology. I was only telling a story. He plays a lot of mind games, which I never thought I needed a sports psychologist, but I don't think he actually does it with me, but he probably does. Like when I was going into,
you just don't know it.
Yeah, you just don't know, and indirectly it feeds in. But some of the things he's told me over the years, like, have paid huge dividends in terms of racing. So I was telling a story recently about how in the build-up for the Irish Life Marathon, Dublin Marathon last year, he told me just basically, and he was right, I was in great form. We'd never talked about winning the national title. That was never even considered, wasn't even a pipe dream.
So pressure was off.
There was no pressure. I went into it just kind of, let's enjoy this. And my aim was really to be with the front pack at 3 miles. So going into Phoenix Park, I said, if I'm at that front pack, brilliant. That's where I want to be. And that was an achievement for me. But he turned around to me before, and he actually went on holidays the week of the race, so he wasn't even around. But he told me basically, look, you're in great form. Whatever will be. There's nothing can hold you back. You could run 2:10, 2:15, whatever. You could run 2:25. You could win. You could not win. Just don't hold yourself back, and don't have any limits on what you can achieve. And I remember going up Chesterfield last October and kind of remembering that. And the group, we split into two groups at the time.
How close to the end of Chesterfield, sorry?
It's only about 3 miles in.
Okay,
so
sorry.
This is very early.
Okay,
well, it broke into two groups, and I got dropped into the second, and I kind of said, they'll come back. And they came back within, I'd say, about a kilometre.
Right.
And able to work my way through the field.
So being calm in the moment of crisis.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right, that's really interesting.
But yeah, like he brings a lot from other sports into it, from a sports psychology perspective. It does make you wouldn't think running needs all the sports psychology that you would maybe for other team sports. But it's the same thing, because you're out on your own.
More.
You panic. You're kind of on your own for, like, in a marathon, 2.5 hours.
At least in a team sport, somebody can catch you by the shoulder and say, "What are you doing?" You know. But there's, like, it's you talking to yourself.
Yeah.
For 26 miles, 385 yards. So, did you know you'd won the national title when you crossed the finish line? Like, had you marked everybody along the way going?
Yeah, so we were quite lucky. So in the national title race, so they'll have 3 cyclists, 3 marshals, one with each first, second, and third.
Okay.
So we were in the group going through Crumlin, and there was about 6 of us, and I was kind of thinking maybe top 5 here. But as people fell off and kind of dominoes fell, got into third cyclist, then I got to the second, and then I got to the first, in and around UCD. So that's about 6 miles to go. So I knew I was in first, and funny, I was kind of petrified, kind of thinking about what am I going to do in the national here with 6 miles to go, 10k, and the cyclist was telling me there's no one behind you, so just calm down, run slower.
Right.
I don't know who he had the money on, but it wasn't me.
Run slower.
No, and to be honest, I saw my wife at UC or at RTE, and to be honest, she hit the roof, so it was quite emotional.
Okay, wow.
To get in from there.
Okay, so you see her from far away. You have a moment.
Yeah.
Wow, that's mad.
Yeah, I was going to stop, but then I think she would have killed me.
When does the psychology kick in? Because it's easy to be, in that leading pack after. Well, not easy. But if you're in the leading pack after 3 miles, it's easier psychologically to process that. But if you know you're in the first place nationally with 6 miles left, surely then the psychology starts kicking in. Do any doubts start kicking in? And you're like, Jesus, I'm actually going to win here.
To be honest, I knew I could win from there. The only risk I had, or the only concern, I thought my calf was going to pop.
Right.
So you're kind of running, going, and the more people are saying slow down, I was like, I'm not changing my stride. I'm not changing anything here. I'm just going to run pretty much exactly as you're going to go, right? So, like from a psychology perspective, look, the Dublin Marathon, the Irish Life Dublin Marathon, it's known as the friendly marathon. The crowds are 3 deep, and when you're winning it, to be honest, hopefully I get to experience it again, but when you're winning it, it's insane. Like the noise level, the crowd's probably like being in the Aviva, to be honest, this weekend. Like it's quite hard to take in, and you don't really take it in. So that last 6 miles, it was a blur of noise, familiar faces, and probably the cyclist in front of me having a little chat with me or whatever it is. But like it was just a big blur to get through. Like
the mad thing about it is that amateurs can have the same buzz from the crowds as well, like, because they obviously come out not just to see the elite athletes. A lot of the people stay there, and a lot of people will have that moment with their families as well. It was one of the things that we found over the years doing the triathlons, is that there's an incredible community of people, and while you're completely singular as you in the race, you're actually part of this massive continuum all the way back to the great Irish athletes, but also part of it seems like a big movement of people who are back out on the roads racing and running, and I think that you're right. It feels like athletics is having a moment, particularly our young track athletes who are kind of just blitzing the world stage at the moment and such great ambassadors. With that in mind, what's your ambition over the next 18 months as somebody who's won a national title at marathon? Have you a plan? Have you a dream?
A Paris dream, is it? To be honest, I don't. If I'm honest, I probably haven't really thought too much about it. So look, I've incredibly difficult, or like I've a busy job life. I've two small children, another one due in August, so a third child as well. So to be honest, there's a lot going on.
We have a few Dadcast episodes which can help you out with that. But there's one in specific that I might refer you to afterwards. But anyway,
is it to do with 3 kids and a marathon runner? Is it?
Yeah.
But no, to be honest, my ambition over 12 months, 18 months, it's just to get faster and to enjoy it. So this year I went to Rotterdam, got a personal best, as they call it. So
2 hours 18:57.
Yeah, so broke that 2:20 barrier, which I've been trying to do for, I would say, 10 years. So that was a huge, this is the sort of thing, it's a huge achievement personally for me, and to be honest, my family, and the support I get from them. So my ambition is to keep improving and just to keep enjoying it. Paris, to be honest, I think there's going to be a very, very strong Irish contingent there. I hope there is. And I think there's going to be the national title race this year, with the way qualification for Paris and the Olympics is now in marathon running.
How does it work?
So basically they split it. So 2:08 is your time qualifier. So in the past it could have been 2:18, so it's 2:08 now. So they expect about 50% from that. For the participants in the Olympics, but the other 50% is going to be points. So you can get points from your national title. So you get 50 points or whatever it is. So basically, if you run a time, and the points will bring the time down. So a 2:11 now could be the equivalent of a 2:08,
okay,
2:09, because you have those points difference from the national.
Yeah, okay.
So all of a sudden, your national title race in Ireland or France or wherever it is, hugely important. So it'll be a very interesting national title race, and to be honest, the Irish Life Dublin Marathon has buddied up with and partnered with the national title for a number of years now. So it happens in Dublin. It's the centre stage. October bank holiday weekend is, to be honest, for marathon running, it's the Christmas of our year. So everything's going to be. It's a very exciting year this year.
Will you do a marathon between now and then, like a competitive one?
Not a competitive one. I'm doing I'm actually going to Kenya next month for a week. The firm I work with sponsor or support a charity for wildlife conservation in Kenya, and they about 10 people globally go over, 15 go to run a marathon in, it's called Lewa, so it's at 6,000 feet and 35 degrees.
Right. Nice handy one for you. Yeah.
Not something I'd recommend anyone else to do, but to be honest, the opportunity came to go to a great player of the world and support a great cause. So I kind of said, yeah, of course I'll be there.
Okay.
So not a very competitive race because I've never done altitude training or anything like that. So
a bit of pressure on you though, I suspect. In that, like, we're just going for
it's in Kenya and they're the world marathon champions, so I don't know how much there will be.
Certainly within the firm anyway. And so there won't be any opportunity for you to pick up points other than at the national.
So there's, it was a brief summary again, but you can pick up points at world majors as well.
But from your perspective this year,
no.
All right, okay. So there's a lot of eggs in the basket for this year's.
For a number of people, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And how many? When you said a big contingent, we have 3 marathon runners making the Olympics.
So I think the max that you can put in is 3.
Okay.
3 male and obviously female as well.
Okay, and so competition is fairly intense.
I think it will be, to be honest. I think a lot of people from kind of tracking and kind of seeing what's happening are keeping their, I would say, powder dry. They're definitely gearing up for a big push later in the summer. And the interesting thing with marathon running, and kind of going back to what we were saying about increasing female participation, the really interesting thing is some of our female athletes and marathon runners in particular are actually relatively much stronger than the male counterparts when it comes to racing.
Yeah.
So like when you look at the female team we send, like I think that'll be actually a far stronger team. I don't want to say far stronger, but like it will be relatively like generally we have had a lot more success with female runners and in athletics.
Well, I mean, I Katrina McKiernan's marathon exploits are obviously a massive target for everybody to try and reach. But like, if we ever have another Katrina McKiernan marathon, we'll be very lucky, and that'll be a superstar in the making. All right, so the advice to everybody is try and sign up for the marathon. I think there's going to be a lottery again this year, is there?
So the marathon is the Irish Life Marathon, I think it's fully subscribed this year, but there is an opportunity for transfers happening in the summer. So that's something new this summer. But there's also the Irish Life Race Series. So that's kind of stepping up from 5 mile all the way through the summer to basically gear you up for the marathon later in the summer. So that kicks off the 18th of June in Corky Park. So that's the 5 mile and then into 10k, 10 mile and half marathon. And to be honest, personally, probably going back to last year when you asked about it, like when I approached the Dublin Marathon last year, I actually felt I was very weak on hills. So I'm a Kildare man, very, very flat area, so there's not really much hills. And actually, the one thing myself and Brendan talked about was actually the race series, so the Irish Life Race Series, and using that as actually how to build up into the Dublin Marathon, because each of those races are actually quite like the Dublin Marathon. So a number of them take place in Phoenix Park. You can have a few drags in that and a few hills, and actually that gives you an awful lot of strength to actually tackle the full marathon in October.
Right. What's going through your brain during that 2 hours 10 minutes? Do you know that a lot of people talk about running as freedom and their brain is nearly empty, but from your perspective, are you thinking about anything particular, or does your brain cross into strange territories? Or
in the marathon, probably not. In training runs, definitely. I'll think about the 10 emails I haven't sent or whatever else, like everyone else, and probably the bin that I never put out. But in the marathon, you're very much focused on nutrition and pacing.
Right.
So it probably
getting the gels in,
getting carbohydrates in as early as possible, and really getting that in. Obviously water, and then just seeing where you are in the race and kind of pacing it on that. There's not really I'm not thinking about my holiday in the Dublin Marathon, if I'm honest, but like you definitely, like the freedom, like it's an incredible sport, because the freedom, the mental health like benefits you get from running is just it's incredible. And like you do get to time, like I will more than likely than not come home from a run. I'll probably run home tonight and I'll have 10 things in my head to do straight away that I have to prioritise. So like it's great.
Listen, thanks very much for joining us, Shane. Did you run a marathon? Did we manage to get through this whole slot without you bringing it up? I mean, sorry. The whole point of running a marathon is that you tell everybody you ran a marathon.
Yeah. Probably in about twice the time this man ran it.
How many have you done?
I've only done one marathon.
All right.
Dublin 2015.
What's wrong with you?
I know. I'm mad to do the flat. Berlin's the flat one, isn't it?
Yep.
I'm mad to do Berlin because at least the ego will take a little bit of a boost, maybe, if I do proper training for it. So yeah. Ronnie Sullivan's got me back into the running buzz as well.
There you go.
He's mad for it, so.
There you go. It's been a week of running on the show. And if you do manage to see a flash of blue when you're on the train from Hazelhatch into Dublin, bang on the side of the train and wish Martin all the best. Martin, thanks very much for joining us today. And we'll obviously keep an eye on the exploits across the rest of the season. It's 9:38 on tomorrow's show. Adrian and Shane are here with Alan Quinlan, Gilly Flaherty, retired Irish boxer and, of course, hero of Katie Taylor, Deirdre Gogarty. We've got David Brady previewing Mayo and Kerry. We have a live AI demonstration with Jess Kelly as well. Plenty more besides. Right now we're going to play out with Gavin Casey talking with Joe last night, previewing the Katie Taylor fight. Have a tremendous Thursday.
Now you're very welcome back. So happy to say, Gavin Casey, the 42 here in studio. Good evening. Great to have you in.
Thanks, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, very well. This fight is finally here. Feels like we've been talking about it for a long time. Undisputed champion in 2 weight classes. The prize on offer to Katie Taylor this Saturday at the 3 Arena. Chantal Cameron, very much here, as she said herself, to spoil the party. This will be on DAZN. Wondering when the GAA Go-esque realisation will kick in for people that somehow this hasn't been snapped up free to air and they'll have to make a decision sometime around Saturday evening is going to kick in.
It's a funny one with DAZN because for all of their efforts, I suppose, to break into the mainstream broadcasting market, when you're just an app, which is what it has been for a long time, even if it is relatively convenient once you have it on your phone and if you can afford to pay for it, it's almost the idea of having to download the app to watch something. You're like, nah, I'll leave it off. I'll see the highlights in the morning. But they do now have a linear TV channel as well, which from their perspective will hopefully afford them the chance to even show themselves in pubs and things like that, which hasn't been an option for them, again, because they've been an app for so long. Okay. So, yeah, it's a funny one, I guess. Even though Taylor has been fighting on DAZN for the past 2.5, 3 years since Eddie Hearn left Sky Sports and teamed up with them, I will still receive a lot of questions as to where the fight is going to be shown. Like, they just haven't really made the cultural impact, I guess, that they were looking to make.
I think it's €10 territory a month, so it's not the most exorbitant.
I think it's gone up. I think it might.
What hasn't gone up? Exactly. What hasn't gone up, Gav? Yeah, exactly. Okay. So Katie Taylor comes into the fight as the undisputed lightweight champion. She is 22-0. Chantal Cameron, current undisputed light welterweight champion, 17-0, 8 by knockout. Come bell time, Cameron will have the guts of 10 pounds on Katie Taylor here.
I would imagine so, yeah. I suppose there are 2 ways of looking at it. The way Taylor would see fighting up at light welterweight is that to not have to cut weight, from her point of view, is an advantage in that, as she says, she can just focus on the fight and the tactics involved and her mental preparation, I guess. She walks around at about 142, 143 pounds when she's out of office, and the limit of light welter is 140. So there's virtually no cut involved for her. Cameron, I'm not sure what she walks around at, but certainly there will be a cut for her. She looked in really good condition today at the public workouts. But the thing is, after the weigh-in on Friday, she has free rein to rehydrate to whatever size feels comfortable for her. So yeah, probably 10 plus pounds is what I'd reckon, which, when you're talking about 2 human beings who are actually quite small, is a significant advantage. And even looking at them today, they didn't cross paths necessarily, but you could just notice that Chantal Cameron is a bigger woman than Katie Taylor, and we already know she hits harder. She hits harder even up at a heavier division. She's probably physically stronger. She's younger. She's fresher in boxing terms, fewer miles on the clock. So I would say this is a fight that actually favours her in more ways than it doesn't.
Yeah, 3 inches reach as well over Taylor, 69 to Taylor's 66. You mentioned the age difference, and it's not just that it's 4 years. It's 4 years when you're 37, as Taylor is. Like 37, or 5 years, 37 against a 32-year-old feels very different to a 30-year-old against a 25-year-old. As we all find out, Gav, these are costly years in your mid-30s when it comes to ageing. And the other thing is, Katie's been in a lot of wars, a lot of mileage on the clock, a lot of mileage in those calves. I know you were writing about that in the 42. It doesn't seem Chantal Cameron would have come through half the punishment that Katie's been on the end of.
No, definitely not. And the thing you mentioned about the calves is only interesting because it's a fight in which Taylor's going to have to remain as mobile as is humanly possible for 10 rounds in order not to get trapped in corners or tight spots the way she did against Amanda Serrano, in order not to allow Cameron to tie her up in the clinch and drain her energy that way so that she can come on strong in the final stretch of the bout. And age is just a number, right? Like, I know it's a cliche, but it actually applies to sports generally as well. It really is about mileage. Like, the odometer will start ticking over when you're in some of the fights that Taylor has been in over the last 3-4 years. It's important to stress she has won a world title at 140 pounds herself, right? So that was Manchester in 2019, but we are talking 3.5 years ago. It was November 2019 against Christina Lidarditu from Greece, who isn't quite the fighter that Chantel Cameron is, and Taylor navigated that fight pretty well, but it was tricky. And 3.5 years on, she's had 3 of the best or most exhilarating fights of her career, but also the most taxing fights of her career. The rematch with Delphine Persoon in 2020, a brilliant fight with Natasha Jonas in 2021, and then the Serrano fight last April. And as you mentioned, as the clock ticks towards 37, the body doesn't recover quite as quickly as it used to. I'm not saying she'll be sort of carrying niggles in with her from her last fight, but more so wear and tear applies in boxing the same way it would in any contact sport. And I would say particularly in boxing, where your brain is being rattled around as well as your body. So at a certain point with most fighters, if they stay there for a little bit too long, they find out that it was one too many. It was one step too many. Mickey Ward mentioned in his third fight with Arturo Gatti, he felt himself growing old between rounds. Literally, as he got off the stool, I think it was in the third round, he realised, it's gone. And he lost that fight. And from an Irish perspective, that's what we hope doesn't happen this weekend. Taylor would tell you there's absolutely zero danger of that happening. And somebody like her who lives the life, who really, aside from her loved ones, her faith, and I guess her boat in Connecticut, where she tends to escape from the world and goes out on the Connecticut River, like, boxing is the central pillar of her existence, and she dedicates pretty much every spare moment she has to it, and probably even some of the moments that aren't spare. And that will extend a fighter's career as well, right? Yes. Most don't make it to 37 fighting as well or as capably as she does now. So I would say, without meaning to sound in any way unkind to her, I actually think it's a compliment, maybe backhanded. She's probably been in a natural athletic decline for the last 6-7 years. Like, I think she was probably a little bit faster before Rio than even when she turned professional in the autumn of 2016. And the fact that she's still able to beat a fighter of the caliber of Amanda Serrano as recently as last year, and she's still in this mix, is actually one of the great feats of her career.
Yeah, it's a slightly unsatisfying conclusion as part of a preview, because the last time we saw Taylor push to the pin of her collar was against Serrano in April a year ago. There was the Carvajal fight, as you mentioned, in October. But in effect, it's not like a soccer player where you can spot the decline on a regular basis. In boxing, you give it all, you fight, you go into hibernation. None of us quite know how you're going to re-emerge. Maybe you don't quite know how you're going to re-emerge. So it's like a question mark hanging over this fight, and it's very hard for anybody to give a conclusive answer, but it's really worth noting. In terms of, styles making fights, you said there that Taylor's going to have to stay very mobile here. Is that because if she gets into a brawl with Cameron, it's just the strength, which we've mentioned, is going to be too much for Taylor in a brawl? Are you sure you're ready to commit to that?
No, I wouldn't commit to it necessarily, but I would say that is a huge risk. And like,
Taylor does like to get sucked into brawls against all better judgment.
That's always a concern, and I think her team would probably tell you there is a concern even coming into this fight. Like, particularly, you're holding home ground here. You know what I mean? You've got an English fighter coming over. Okay, it's Cameron's title's on the line, and Taylor is the challenger in this equation. But really, Cameron is coming over taking what belongs to you. Like, she's taking your scalp ultimately. She wants to become the first woman to beat Katie Taylor as a professional. I think the world title belts, from Cameron's point of view, kind of go out the window. Like, the prize is almost bigger to be the one to beat Katie on her home soil. For Taylor, obviously, the prize is to become a two-way undisputed champion, which is kind of extraordinary. And like, just to put the fight into context as well, from that point of view, it's exceptionally rare that you have two undisputed champions fight each other in boxing. Like, you can go back, weirdly with boxing, for a sport that's as good as it is at keeping records of its results, it's very hard to sort of find information like an undisputed champion versus undisputed champion. Obviously, the advent of new sanctioning bodies and new belts over the decades sort of muddies the waters as well. But I went through it for about an hour and a half the other day, and I think the last pure one was when Carmen Basilio moved up from welterweight, where he was champion, to fight the greatest boxer of all time, Sugar Ray Robinson, middleweight champion in 1957.
Okay.
There are a couple that you could say qualify since then, but there are a couple of caveats, like maybe one belt was missing, or, for example, Michael Spinks moved up from light heavy in 1987, was it, to fight Larry Holmes, but at the time Holmes just didn't bother with the WBC title. He'd given away the WBA title. The IBF sort of, I guess, paid him money in order to endorse them as a new sanctioning body, but he was the Ring magazine champion, so he was the recognised heavyweight champion. Leon Spinks came up as light heavyweight champion and beat him. I think that's the closest thing to this fight in modern times.
Okay.
So I think sometimes with Katie Taylor fights, particularly over the last couple of years, maybe people can get bored of the idea that this is her toughest test, because it seems as though every second fight is that. But that actually is just a testament to how good she is and how ambitious she remains, and how crazy she is in some ways that she keeps wanting to take these tests. And
because there would have been a strong argument, I'm sure, maybe even within her camp, I don't know, I suspect not within her own head because she is so single-minded, but there would have been a strong argument to say, you have just been an icon, this is your long overdue homecoming, pick a fight that you're going to win in front of the home crowd.
Yeah, and it's just not the way she's wired. I think where being 37 and having boxed for 20, 25 years, or however, I guess 25 years she's been boxing, where that comes into play here is the fact that as much as she will say she takes every opponent as seriously as the next, and she's just focused on the fight in hand, no matter who it's against, she does need something to sort of stir her. Like, she still needs a rocket under her the odd time in order to really put in, I guess, train as maniacally as she has for this fight. Because of the jeopardy in it, that's what'll get her out of bed in the morning. She'll be professional before every fight, but I think it's almost like sharpening the mind as much as her physical tools for a fight like this.
Will Cameron have experienced anything like this before?
No, and I think that's probably one of the potential advantages on Taylor's side of the coin, in that Taylor's been fighting or preparing for and fighting in, like, let's call them major finals since 2005. She won her first European Championship in 2005. Cameron's amateur career was actually pretty impressive, but just nowhere near the level of Taylor's. Her best two results at major championships were a silver medal at the 2010 EU Championships, were a little bit of a diluted version of the Europeans, and then Taylor actually beat her in the semi-final of the same tournament the year afterwards, but I think that was Cameron's 11th or 12th major international fight at that time, so you can disregard it as far as it pertains to this Saturday. But the reason I bring that up is, yes, she's won 4 world title belts as a professional since. She won the final 2 of them against Jessica McCaskill in her last fight, but she hasn't been exposed to the type of occasion that Taylor has as far back as even London 2012, that final, or Madison Square Garden more recently, where it's the white hot heat of a proper professional boxing occasion. And she's walking into, I would say, the most daunting away trip in professional boxing currently. Fighting Katie Taylor in Dublin is nuts, really.
What kind of personality is she?
It's actually pretty hard to gauge, and sometimes that kind of scares me about her, in the sense that she says very little and just seems very steely focused. And often she's very softly spoken, and it almost maybe gives a fraudulent sense of vulnerability, not intentionally, but just that she speaks so softly, and she almost seems unsure of herself in public speaking, that you think she can be gotten at. And then you see her fight, and maybe a little bit like Taylor herself, there's such a dichotomy between the two things.
And what have the pre-fight relations been like? I did see, for instance, Cameron was expressing a certain worry that Taylor often gets the nod in close-run fights. Mentioned Delphine and Amanda, and they could have been close fights. Katie gets the nod, so home crowd, home judges. It didn't seem like the most inflammatory thing I'd ever read. Generally, have they been cordial or communicative in any great way?
Yeah, it's funny, I guess, when they both sat down in March at the first press conference in the Mansion House up here, pretty cordial. I think Cameron speaks of Taylor with great reverence, and she acknowledges that she wouldn't be in the situation she's in, even regardless of this fight, had Taylor not turned pro in 2016 and really transformed their sport. And most female boxers would view Taylor through a similar lens. But then when they were down recording separately some promo material at the 3 Arena yesterday, there's a clip of Cameron saying, like, yeah, I'm here to spoil the party, but also, and I want to beat her up, you know. So she's not necessarily afraid of stating her intentions or laying out her mission statement ahead of it. I think Taylor probably doesn't really give two you-know-whats about Cameron or really any opponent. Like, I don't think she spends any great deal of time thinking about them, and is often, I'm sure she's sick of being asked, but it's almost a pointless question to ask her. Like, if you put it to Taylor at tomorrow's press conference, oh, Cameron says she's going to beat you up, what do you think of that? Taylor would be like, oh, did she say that, yeah? Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
You know? I would say, to be honest, that Cameron has probably fixated on Taylor for a long time, because she's had what Cameron wanted for a long time. Not only titles, but a level of exposure and fame and adulation within the sport of boxing generally that Cameron couldn't quite get to. She was sort of, she had Eddie Hearn as a promoter, but didn't have, say, the fan base, and didn't have like the name recognition that Taylor had, which is actually part of the reason why this fight has taken so long to make, because it's always been a risky fight for Taylor, but you wanted it to be as valuable as it could possibly be for both of them, right? So it's taken a while. I wouldn't be shocked if she had a Katie Taylor dartboard at some point and was trying to will it into existence. And in the end, it was only because Amanda Serrano pulled out of a fight in Dublin that Taylor pulled the trigger on the fight, which actually surprised Cameron and her team, as far as I know.
So there's a certain kind of Dublin is open for business again vibe. First world title fight since 2011, City West, Rigondo and Willie Casey. Eddie Hearn, denying claims that there's been an increase in security. And so that dichotomy, I'm sure, is very much there, and you've seen it, where on the one hand, this is the fitting, long overdue homecoming for an icon who is above reproach. And on the other hand, there is the underbelly to the sport in this country, which is not good. And I don't think anybody is naive enough to suggest the issues have been fully resolved. And you have, Jamie Moore refusing to answer questions about Daniel Kinahan when Kieran Cunningham asked him about his endorsement of Kinahan previously. And we're not here to talk about that. And yet we're here in Dublin, and it's, a mile down the road from where people might think that's important to talk about that issue. But they're trying to navigate those waters. And come fight time, everything else will dissolve away and the fight will be absorbing, you would think. But this week, to what extent has the wider issue of boxing and Dublin and the Regency been a factor to your eye?
To be fair, the week from the media perspective has only just kicked off. There was a public workout today, and that's where Eddie Hearn was talking about the security issues. I think it was Kev Byrne, we were in a scrum, who posed that question to him first, and that's probably the extent to which it's come up. Like, the public workout environment isn't one in which you're really speaking to anybody at particular length. Tomorrow's presser will be interesting from that point of view.
Who's up tomorrow?
They'll all be there. So promoters, trainers, fighters. It's like the main press conference. But then there was one in March, and Kieran Cunningham was the only person to ask that question of Jamie Moore, and it wasn't really a particularly dominant topic of conversation, even amid the small talk around the hall.
Yeah.
And I often wonder. The thing is, sometimes there might be a perception that people haven't been asking these questions throughout the years of MTK Global or about Daniel Kinahan and about all of these connections. The thing is, you can ask the questions as much as you like, but you cannot force people to answer them. And that's the card that Jamie Moore played when Kieran asked him that question. And really, there isn't a great deal of available follow-up questions to that. Like, Kieran did follow it up by saying exactly as you say, Joe, well, do you not think it's worth talking about given we're here?
Yeah.
And the response again was, well, we're here to talk about the fight. And where do you go from there, really?
No, not anywhere really, because people are going to tune in and watch the fight. They don't really need to answer those questions.
I also do think, as much as, yes, Cameron is an ex-MTK fighter, as is Gary Cully, who's in the co-main event, there is I wonder, is there sort of a distinction in a way when we talk about the sort of underbelly of Irish boxing? We really are just talking about the Kinahan organised crime group and their influence within the wider sport of boxing. And I guess, like, by extension, the boxers who signed with MTK as a management company, who have no involvement with crime themselves as individuals, but have had their morals questioned for many years for making a selfish decision, but a decision that they would explain as being the best one for themselves and their families in a sport or in a career that can be switched off in the blink of an eye. A career in which your life actually can end in the blink of an eye. That's how they justify it to themselves, and maybe, without meaning to become too tangential with it, I've often felt like maybe the boxers themselves are judged a little bit too harshly within that whole dynamic or situation because of those reasons, and because, like, there aren't a great deal of options in boxing if you want to really further yourself or really be looked after. And one thing MTK Global, for all of the badness that the people behind the scenes brought into the world, they were a pretty decent management company, strictly in a business boxing sense. And I often think as well, I don't know, I'm wearing a pair of Nike runners. When I went into a shop to buy them, like, did I stop and think where they were made? Like, I know where they were made, right? But you sort of park things to suit yourself every now and then. And if you're a boxer from England, for example, who might be vaguely aware of what MTK truly was or some of the nefarious forces behind it, but you sort of frame it in your head or square it away as being a foreign problem, it's an Irish problem, it was an easy decision to make. And that the reason I say all of that is, like, MTK are gone. Absolutely, Kinnan remains influential in the sport, but, like, what are we going to do? Like, root them out, you know?
Another aspect just to touch on before the clock comes against us, and perhaps this depends on your perspective on Conor McGregor. There are probably lots of people listening who adore the man as much as ever. I think there is a fair quotient of the country who now have serious reservations about Conor McGregor just based on his behaviour in recent years. And by contrast, you have in Taylor maybe the most revered sporting brand around, and yet their relationship seems incredibly tight. McGregor's come on board as a big sponsor. She was thanking him on Instagram. He's all over this week all of a sudden.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
OTB Sports Radio.
We've got a panel who know a thing or two about being trailblazers. All right, sport was already kind of impeded upon. Sinead Kassan.
There's an innate interest in it anyway.
Dermot Lang, it didn't blow me away with him. Jason Sherlock and Kieran Donaghy with us.
Basketball would have been my main game.
Retro panel for you now.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Retro Panel. Wednesdays and Thursdays from 4.
OTB AM.
The whole gang are here. Kathleen's here. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. Shane?
How are things? Good morning.
Colm's also here.